Chapter 420. The power of the past. Since being informed of his potential by Guan, Longqing stopped cultivating his physical body. Instead, he began to settle his mind and feel the foundation of his own being. Shen Xinzi had no objections to this. Shen Xinzi felt that he was not worthy to teach Longqing. He appeared calm on the outside, but was very lost at heart. Having stayed in the Third Medicine Valley for hundreds of years, he had seen through nothing and learned nothing. Autumn gave way to winter. Snow fell from the sky, plunging the great heaven and earth into an expanse of whiteness. That day, after the morning exercises were over, Guan stood by the wooden rail admiring the snowscape. The snowflakes landing on his body turned into mist, swirling around him. His eyes were fixed on the garden, but his divine thought was cast towards outer heaven. An anomaly had appeared in the reincarnation vortex. After Guan's breakthrough, the reincarnation rules within the vortex had been constantly changing. He couldn't tell whether it was because of him or simply a coincidence. It was likely due to his traveling back and forth through the reincarnation vortex. He had caused a great upheaval in a universe's path, which in turn affected the reincarnation vortex. He wasn't worried, though. Even the greatest anomaly in the reincarnation vortex would hardly pose a threat to the Xian Yuan Zizai Xian. He speculated that beings from other universes would come to the great heavenly spirit land, which was undoubtedly a disaster for the great heaven and earth. While he was contemplating, an Xian arrived at his side. She mentioned Longqing. The boy had been sitting still under the mystic pure tree for a month, and she was afraid he might go mad. It's fine, it's not been that long. Sometimes it's good to think things through, Guan said casually. Longqing was born in the Nirvana realm. Guan had merely sealed his cultivation level. Now, it seemed that Longqing was rapidly growing stronger when, in fact, he was merely recovering his original strength. After hearing this, an Xian couldn't help but ask, "Master, how high is his potential really? How does it compare to my senior and junior brothers?" Guan replied, "In terms of innate talent he is stronger, but your senior brother has a sharper intuition." In Guan's eyes, what was truly terrifying about and how was his intuition? Not only did he cultivate quickly, but he also had an astonishing understanding of spells and divine skills. He had been imprisoned by the immortal dynasty, but had not delayed his cultivation at all, and he was not far from reaching the Nirvana realm. He even anticipated the commotion and how it would cause in the immortal dynasty once he reached the Nirvana realm, and looked forward to it. That amazing! An Xian widened her eyes in astonishment. Before Guan had revealed Longqing's potential, she had always had sympathy for him. What use was physical strength without spiritual power? Then why? An Xian asked cautiously. Guan glanced at her and chuckled. "You're right, I'm intentionally forging him." Just as she thought. An Xian knew that Guan was an expert in the sealing technique. The Blood Prison Great Saint was an example. A mighty Mahayana being suppressed to such a state, and others were completely unaware of Guan's sealing methods. Suddenly, she felt relieved and said with a laugh, "This kid is already arrogant enough. Without restrictions, he could make a huge mess indeed." Guan looked up, noticing that the reincarnation vortex was changing, expanding rapidly. While an Xian was still pondering Longqing's temperament, figures emerged from the reincarnation vortex, all humanoid but with demonic qi, ghostly energy and demon energy. They quickly lined up, turning their gaze towards the great heavenly spirit land. Their cultivation levels were high. Although none were free immortals, the weakest among them were Tao Void mysterious immortals. Guan could sense that free immortals were rushing here from the reincarnation vortex. He couldn't help but calculate the major trends of the world, and the images of the future came into his vision. He saw some troubling scenes. Destiny, huh? Guan thought to himself but outwardly nodded along with an Xian, talking about Longqing. After a long while, an Xian bid her farewell, and did not disturb Guan any further. Guan continued to watch outer heaven. He saw the Holy Court and the Immortal Dynasty dispatch a large number of cultivators to investigate. The three forces coexisted under the outer layer of light without clashing, at least for the time being. Further probing would be needed later on. Guan turned and flew towards the outer gate city. He was preparing to release the immortal cultivation version of Dream of the Red Chamber, following the romance of the Three Kingdoms. Many in the immortal cultivation world awaited Pan-An's fine work with anticipation. Writing was no longer a source of profit for Guin. Instead, he was more interested in sharing and reminiscing, passing down the works of Earth literature to the immortal cultivation world to have beings remember for him. An ancient hour later, Guin left the book collection hall under the respectful farewell of its disciples. He decided not to leave the city immediately, choosing instead to continue wandering the streets. Strolling through the streets was also his hobby. By glimpsing the cause and effect of passers-by, he could further enhance his understanding of fate and destiny. As always, Guin would encounter acquaintances. Although his mindset had changed, his attitude towards others had not. He remained friendly and enthusiastic. Gradually, Guin arrived near the heavenly repair platform. From a distance, he saw many people gathered around the heaven-cutting axe. Even on the platform, there was a heaven and earth flying immortal, who concealed his cultivation and appeared very ordinary, unable to draw attention, at least on the heavenly repair platform. Swordsmanship stood steadfast beside the heaven-cutting axe, straight as a rod. Like a faithful devotee, he had not brought any benefit to Guin, but his dedication and perseverance moved him. After all, the stronger Swordsmanship became, the more he underscored the might of the sword Venerable Fudao. Guin stepped onto the heavenly repair platform, making his way through the crowd towards the heaven-cutting axe. Even on the platform, Guin would encounter acquaintances, necessitating some small talk. By the time he reached the heaven-cutting axe, half an incense stick's time had passed. Swordsmanship saw Guin and smiled, a rare sight on his stern face. He greeted Guin proactively, asking, "What brings you here today?" Guin replied, "I've been to the book collection hall." Swordsmanship's eyes lit up as he asked, "Could it be a new book?" He knew that Guin was the author of Investiture of the Gods, of which he was a dedicated reader. It was the work he read the most, but he also greatly enjoyed Journey to the West and Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Guin did not conceal anything and nodded in response, which thrilled Swordsmanship. At that moment, a cultivator who had been trying to pull out the heaven-cutting axe failed. He released his grip, stepped back 3 paces and remarked with emotion, "The legacy of Sword Venerable Fudao truly is not easy to obtain. Even I, a wandering immortal, could not succeed." Wandering immortal? A stir went through the crowd, and someone complained in a low voice, "Can this legacy really be obtained by someone?" As soon as these words were spoken, he faced criticism from those around him. "Couldn't you feel the sword intent of Sword Venerable Fudao when you were on the platform?" That's right, even if you can't obtain Sword Venerable Fudao's legacy, at least you can experience his sword intent, which is a great honor. Sword Venerable Fudao is so formidable. If his legacy were obtained within a few hundred years, it wouldn't seem as precious. That just means the fated person hasn't arrived yet. I really look forward to that day. When it comes, the commotion caused by the heaven-cutting axe will surely shake heaven and earth. Guin listened to the discussions around him and reflected inwardly. Was he being too harsh? Without speaking of someone's talent, to pull up the heaven-cutting axe, one must at least possess the cultivation level of a free immortal. Due to the appearance of the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor, Guin had quietly strengthened the mana within the heaven-cutting axe, so none but a free immortal could shake the heaven-cutting axe. He had originally planned to ease the conditions when the destined one arrived, but as it stood, finding someone who met his criteria seemed difficult. Never mind, it was just as well if no one obtained it. A legacy that stands for 10,000 years, a million years. That would become legend, embodying even deeper foundations. Do you want to give it a try? Swordsmanship asked Guin. In the meantime, someone else approached and grabbed the axe handle of the heaven-cutting axe. But just like the person before, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't move the heaven-cutting axe one bit. Most people who came to the heavenly repair platform were there to feel the power of Sword Venerable Fudao, and even if they failed, they had no regrets. As such, those who failed to obtain the legacy left with excitement. Forget it. What I really want to ask is, what are you seeking by staying here so long? Guin looked at Swordsmanship and asked with a smile on his face, as if making small talk. After hearing the question, Zuijian shook his head and said, "What can I seek? Being here allows me to comprehend the sword Dao, and I am already content." "Sword Dao ha." Guan murmured, then cupped his hands and turned to leave. Zuijian saw Guan walk away in confusion, and was about to speak when, boom, a majestic sword intent rose from beneath his feet, engulfing his entire body and lifting his robes upwards, fluttering as if they would burst at any moment. Zuijian's face changed dramatically, his eyes filled with surprise and joy. His gaze followed Guan, who was walking away with his back toward him. All around, there was a sound of astonishment as everyone watched him in shock. Only Guan, turning his back on the crowd and not turning around, seemed out of place, as if he were in another dimension. Could it be? Zuijian's eyes widened. Guan had just inquired about his aspirations, and now he had received the sword intent of Sword Venerable Fu Dao. It couldn't be a coincidence. At that moment, Zuijian felt a familiar sword intent emanating from Guan. The sword intent of Sword Venerable Fu Dao, and it was even stronger than his own. It could only be. Zuijian was shocked and excited. He felt no anger at being deceived by a junior. Instead, he was pleasantly surprised. Because he liked investiture of the gods, he had always held a wonderful fantasy about Panin, and he had been saddened for a long time upon learning that Guan was Panin. Now, knowing Panin was Sword Venerable Fu Dao, how could he not be thrilled? He didn't believe Guan was a few hundred years old. He must be some old monster in disguise. The thought of how well he had treated Guan over the years filled him with a sense of excitement. Perhaps he had the chance to take Sword Venerable Fu Dao as his master. As he watched Guan walk in the opposite direction of the crowd, Zuijian was filled with infinite longing. Such capability, yet content to cultivate here. What an extraordinary state of mind. The cultivators from all sides marveled at Zuijian's fortune, as the vast sword intent of Sword Venerable Fu Dao was directed only at him, clearly a reward. More and more disciples of the Supreme Sect appeared as if from nowhere, gathering atop the heavenly repair platform. They saw Zuijian enveloped in sword intent and couldn't help but feel delighted. Whoever received the guidance of Sword Venerable Fu Dao was a treasured asset for the Supreme Sect. And as a community of shared interests, how could they not rejoice? Rumbling, a suppressive roar echoed through the sky, causing all the creatures of heaven and earth to look up. But the cultivators on the heavenly repair platform were not concerned, assuming it was an anomaly caused by the sword intent of Sword Venerable Fu Dao. Walking through the crowd, Guan paused and looked up, his brow lifting. Is this power from the past? Guan thought curiously. His divine thought pierced through the sky, peering into the reincarnation vortex beyond. A powerful entity was descending, one that could directly threaten the safety of the great heavenly spirit land. Chapter 421. Primordial Immortal King. As the cultivator on the heavenly repair platform marveled at Zuijian's fortune, the Supreme Sect sensed something amiss, for the oppressive might enveloping the heavens, and the earth grew stronger. The snow filling the sky was becoming sparse, as if the harsh winter was about to end. In the third Medicine Valley, Shinxinzi, sitting under a tree, looked up with furrowed brows, beginning to calculate by counting on his fingers. Ji Xiaoyu stepped out from the house, looking up at the snowy heavens, her eyes reflecting the figure of a majestic stature. The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor appeared out of nowhere beside her, his expression solemn, and said, "The breath of an immortal king." Ji Xiaoyu turned to look at him, asking, "What is an immortal king?" She had regained many memories from her past life, but there were always gaps. Hence, she could maintain the will of this life. An immortal king is a free immortal who has gathered the chi fortune of heaven and earth in oneself, having undergone reincarnation tribulation. Their mana is said to penetrate the heavens and be unmeasurable, said the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor, looking up with a serious expression on his face. He continued, "The aura of this immortal king is off. There's a strong scent of death." "What does that mean?" Ji Xiaoyu asked, her brows knitted. "I'm not sure, but one thing is certain, the great heavenly spirit land is facing a great disaster." The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor took a deep breath, his eyes flickering, seemingly deep in thought. After hearing this, Ji Xiaoyu shifted her gaze back to the sky, observing the strange phenomena above. The snow melted, the clouds churned, and the sky gradually darkened, the oppressive atmosphere between heaven and earth intensifying, making more and more beings feel uneasy. Guan watched for a while, then walked toward the edge of the heavenly repair platform. Zhua Yijian was still absorbing the sword intent refinement from sword Venerable Fudao, his thoughts being drawn into a state of path enlightenment, forgetting about external matters. When Guan descended from the heavenly repair platform, the disciples of the outer gate city finally noticed the anomalies in the sky. At the same time, in outer heaven in the void, figures knelt, facing the reincarnation vortex, which had grown larger than ever, with a majestic figure radiating light appearing faintly visible in the darkness at the center of the vortex. Before this figure, all the powerful figures under the reincarnation vortex seemed insignificant. The cultivators from the Immortal Dynasty and Holy Court who rushed here changed their expressions drastically at the sight of the figure in the reincarnation vortex. What is that? Such a terrifying aura. How high must his cultivation level be? Be careful, everyone. That figure is neither human nor demon. It must be an evil spirit. Could it be a heavenly demon? But why wouldn't they come from the silent destruction domain? Why do I feel this figure looks somewhat familiar, as if I've seen it somewhere before? As the two factions of beings discussed, they held their Dharma treasures, ready for battle. The figures kneeling under the reincarnation vortex all looked up, their eyes intently fixed on the figure within the vortex, their expressions filled with fervor. Suddenly, an immortal spirit from the Immortal Dynasty burst out shouting, "The primordial immortal king!" At this utterance, the side of the Immortal Dynasty was in uproar, the immortal spirits greatly shocked, their gazes towards the reincarnation vortex filled with disbelief. On the side of the Holy Court, a few strong cultivators who had heard of the name of the primordial immortal king also showed a look of horror. All celestial ranks returned to the Holy Land. A commanding voice echoed in the void, and upon hearing it, the cultivators of the Holy Court turned around and left. Within 3 breaths, all the cultivators of the Holy Court had returned to the great heavenly spirit land. Seeing this, the immortal spirits became increasingly agitated. Is it truly the primordial immortal king? He's still alive. So Yuanshu ancestor created the reincarnation vortex to welcome the primordial immortal king. No, don't you feel that something is off about his aura? But that is the primordial immortal king. No matter what form he takes, he is forever the immortal king of our immortal dynasty. How many years has it been since the birth of the Holy Court? The immortal dynasty has not seen a true unifier of the world. The immortal spirits were overtaken with excitement, though a few showed worried expressions on their faces. Just then, the primordial immortal king within the reincarnation vortex began to move. He slowly emerged from the darkness, a terrifying aura reminiscent of an ancient demon god surging from the vortex, unstoppable like a river bursting its banks. The immortal spirits within the void fell silent, merely staring at him in shock. Holy Court on a grand hall. The holy minister stood before the holy throne, looking up at the starry sky, his brow furrowed and his gaze stern. Around him stood numerous figures, all second-rank celestial beings of the Holy Court, the holy gods. Each one a divine thought true immortal. An old woman dressed in a white-lit feathery robe spoke up. Holy Minister, the arrival of the primordial immortal king is surely directed at us. Regardless of why he has resurrected, we must devise a strategy. The other holy gods agreed, their demeanor calm but their words clearly filled with apprehension towards the primordial immortal king. With the primordial immortal king, the immortal dynasty now had 3 free immortals. In terms of top-tier strength, the Holy Court was now completely outclassed by the immortal dynasty. How could they not feel alarmed? Over the years, although the Holy Court had withstood the onslaughts of the immortal dynasty, anyone with clear sight could see that the Holy Court could not turn the tide and decisively defeat the immortal dynasty within a short period. Now with the emergence of the primordial immortal king, what would happen next was foreseeable. The holy minister with a stern face said, "What strategies do you propose, my lords?" Upon hearing this, the holy gods suddenly fell silent. Facing a free immortal, any plan was meaningless. Only a free immortal could confront another free immortal. One of the holy gods looked at the holy minister and asked, When will you begin your breakthrough? The holy minister had been preparing to break through to a free immortal status, but such a matter could not be rushed. It required ample preparation, and for the holy minister, this tribulation crossing was a life-or-death challenge, naturally not to be undertaken lightly. The holy minister looked at him and said, "If not for some people shirking their responsibilities, I might have already succeeded in my tribulation crossing. We are all contributing to the holy court. I don't know why some clutch onto their chief fortune so tightly, either in seclusion unable to act rashly, or having just released it, unable to retrieve it immediately." He wanted to leverage the entire chief fortune of the holy court for his breakthrough, but once chief fortune was linked with a person, it could not be withdrawn easily. Losing chief fortune would disturb the mind and bring ominous luck. This could not be forced and must be discussed thoroughly with the higher and lower echelons of the holy court, to draw out some of the chief fortune without causing the collapse of the holy court. Moreover, the holy court was still contending with the immortal dynasty. Faced with the holy minister's interrogation, that holy god turned pale and did not make a sound. Another holy god spoke up. "It's too late even for the holy minister to make a breakthrough now. What we need is a free immortal who can join the fight immediately." An old man with a wooden staff stroked his beard and asked, "Are you referring to Sword Venerable Fudao?" Silence descended upon the great hall, the holy gods then turning their gaze towards the holy minister, causing him to furrow his brow. The holy minister cursed inwardly. If Sword Venerable Fudao had been so easy to convince, he would have joined the holy court long ago. Knowing that Sword Venerable Fudao might possess the cultivation of a free immortal, while the holy minister was pleased and relieved, he was also wary. A free immortal who would not reveal his true identity, who wouldn't rethink their assumptions. Chapter 422 I give you a chance with a knife. As the holy minister hesitated, the primordial immortal king stepped out of the reincarnation vortex and presented his image before the immortal spirits. The primordial immortal king had a towering figure, his clothes worn and tattered, and the upper body was left with only strips of cloth drifting slightly. His long hair was spread over his shoulders, emitting a wild and fierce aura. His strands of hair, like the gray rivers of the wilderness, fluttered, stirring the clouds like dragons churning the river, causing the Tao spiritual energy around him to twist, forming a visual impact that could be seen with the naked eye. He seemed to come from ancient times, as if he had traveled from the source of the river of time, arriving at the great heavenly spirit land with an oppressive aura that stifled all creatures. The immortal spirits looked at him, their eyes filled with reverence and anticipation. Beneath the reincarnation vortex, figures radiated an aura similar to that of the primordial immortal king, silent and chilly. Seeing the primordial immortal king, they were not shocked but rather excited. They seemed to know what was about to happen, and were ready to participate. Phew! The primordial immortal king slightly opened his mouth and exhaled a scorching breath. His eyes filled with bloodshot veins as his pupils gradually regained their luster. His gaze first fell upon the figures beneath the reincarnation vortex before shifting to the many immortal spirits in the distance. Facing his gaze, the immortal spirits still felt fear, with some instinctively stepping backward. Different from the primordial immortal king they imagined, this one radiated a dangerous presence, making them feel weird and horrified. Now, the primordial immortal king began to speak, his voice hoarse, making the void of outer heaven even more oppressive. He had not finished speaking when he suddenly opened his mouth and let out an enraged roar. This roar was earth-shattering. Every creature in the great heavenly spirit land heard it. Even Tian Yaoer, Tian Qing, Tian Bai in the hidden spirit palace, and the deep-sea dragon carps in the Nianchu cave were frightened. It felt as if they were suddenly awakened from a dream. The roar of the primordial immortal king, not just a sound wave, but a soul impact. Hearing his roar, all beings felt fear, unable to calm themselves. Creatures on land saw the afterimage of the primordial immortal king in the sky, akin to a mirage, his enormous roaring figure casting an oppressive presence that made their hearts skip. At this moment, Guan stood on the streets of the outer gate city, the surrounding cultivators all looking up at the sky with expressions of dread. In front of Guan, the son of the demon emperor, Wuxia, was also looking at the sky, his brows furrowed. "What's that?" Wuxia murmured to himself. Guan remarked, "It looks like big trouble is coming." The two came across each other rarely, exchanging a few pleasantries before the roar of the primordial immortal king interrupted them. Originally, when the demon land invaded the land of the human race, Wuxia, the son of the demon emperor, sneaked into the supreme sect and had stayed for hundreds of years. Now he had become one of the high-ranking individuals of the supreme sect, helping the cultivators of human race establish connections with the demons. At first, he and Guan got along very well. As time went by and their statuses diverged, they drifted apart. Taking a deep breath, Wuxia said, "Indeed." Then he looked down at Guan with a smile and said, "Don't worry. The supreme sect is now the safest place in the world." Guan nodded and continued their casual conversation. Perhaps because of the appearance of the primordial immortal king, Wuxia had the rare patience and started talking about the current strength of the supreme sect. Meanwhile, in the outer heaven, before the reincarnation vortex, the primordial immortal king stood suspended. He was no longer roaring, his arms hanging loosely. He suddenly looked in the direction of the immortal dynasty. When his gaze suddenly fell upon them, the immortal spirits couldn't help but tremble with fear. The primordial immortal king showed a fierce smile, his eyes narrowed, and in an instant, the entire void was filled with countless eyes of varying sizes, all belonging to the primordial immortal king. Each immortal spirit felt the horror of being watched by countless enemies. Before they could escape, the eyes in the void exploded open, and the immortal spirits' faces drastically changed. They were unable to speak, to run away, as their souls uncontrollably flew out of their bodies towards those eyes. This scene was incredibly eerie, causing the powerful beings who were using divine thought and divine sense to peek into the great heavenly spirit land to shudder in fear. The immortal dynasty did not send reinforcements and let these immortal spirits have their souls snatched away. Quickly, all those souls were absorbed by the eyes of the primordial immortal king, who then closed his eyes. The eyes spread throughout the void vanished all at once. When the primordial immortal king opened his eyes again, the blood in his eyes had disappeared, and the deathly aura around him had dissipated a lot. He looked more like a living spirit. He smiled again and blew a breath towards the corpses of those immortal spirits, and thousands of them turned into ash in an instant. "Welcome back, immortal king, from your exile in Xianyu." A mysterious man who flew out of the reincarnation vortex raised his head and shouted loudly. At his call, the other figures of the reincarnation repeated his words, and the name of the immortal king echoed through the cosmos. The primordial immortal king raised his right hand, and the great heavenly spirit land trembled slightly. The sea of clouds churned, as a patch of ocean suddenly exploded, with terrifying waves shooting up to the sky. A mysterious black object like a mountain surged from the seabed, scattering the clouds and swiftly flying towards the primordial immortal king. Boom! The primordial immortal king caught the incoming object with his right hand. A massive black saber with a handle as long as a mountain ridge, carved with mysterious patterns, the blade thick, seemingly unsharpened, completely black, emanating no aura. Viewed from this position toward the great heavenly spirit land, in the direction from which the black saber had come, the sea of clouds was spreading open to reveal a massive hole. Beneath the hole, a blue expanse was faintly visible, a crack appearing and widening. The gaze of the primordial immortal king fell upon the black saber in his hand, and he murmured to himself, "It's been a long time since I held you. I truly miss the days we fought side by side." Chapter 422 Giving you a chance with a knife_2 He lifted the black broadsword and swung it gently, stirring up the mana that shook the outer layers of the sky, and also caused the reincarnation vortex behind him to twist and ripple. This spectacle made the figures within the reincarnation even more excited, continuously shouting the name of the immortal king. There was a tumult in the sky, while the great heaven and earth was dead silent. As if all living beings were afraid of disturbing them, no one dared to come out, and even less dared to shout. The primordial immortal king raised the black broadsword high, completely releasing his own momentum. It was the momentum of someone standing at the pinnacle of the 9 heavens of the immortal path. Even the Yangxian emperor had never shown such momentum. Far away in the immortal dynasty, The Yangxian Emperor stood atop the Golden Palace, gazing up at this scene, while the ancient immortal emperor appeared out of nowhere beside him, his face ashen. Was this also part of your plan? The ancient immortal emperor asked in a deep voice. The Yangxian Emperor, with an expressionless face, countered. Would I resurrect another emperor of the immortal dynasty to replace myself? After hearing this, the ancient immortal emperor furrowed his brows and asked in astonishment. Then who could it be? The Yangxian Emperor said softly. It seems that Yuanshu ancestor had another reason for opening reincarnation, and perhaps this was all part of the primordial immortal king's calculations. The immortal dynasty and the holy court were in turmoil, creating chaos in the heavenly secrets. His resurrection now might not be impossible. Upon hearing this, the ancient immortal emperor's eyes showed a hint of worry. The momentum of the primordial immortal king was indeed too strong, so powerful that even he, as a free immortal, felt a chill in his heart. How could he not worry? The most critical point was that following the resurrection of the primordial immortal king, it was not the holy court but their immortal dynasty's immortal spirits who were the first to suffer. This was a very dangerous signal. Could it be a plot by the holy court? But that shouldn't be. How could they achieve such a feat? The ancient immortal emperor muttered to himself. The Yangxian emperor did not reply, but in his eyes there was no sign of worry. Instead, there was a will to fight. Ever since he took the throne of the immortal dynasty, people have often compared him to previous immortal emperors, with the primordial immortal king, the founder of the immortal dynasty, being an existence he could never surpass. He had more than once imagined, if he and the primordial immortal king existed in the same era, who would have the last laugh? He was full of confidence in himself. Even when facing the long unbeatable Shengtian, he was confident, for he was much younger than Shengtian. Even though the primordial immortal king's current momentum was strong, the Yangxian emperor did not fear, his heart burning with fighting spirit. On another side, the holy court, currently discussing strategies, the holy ministers and holy gods were astonished that the primordial immortal king had actually annihilated that group of immortal spirits. What was going on? One of the holy gods looked towards the holy minister, and couldn't help but ask, was this your arrangement? The holy minister looked towards the sky, shook his head slightly and said, it has nothing to do with me. I fear that changes are about to arise. Upon hearing this, the holy gods became even more puzzled. They did not feel the delight, but rather a sense of unease. Who, after all, was behind all this? In front of the reincarnation vortex, after the primordial immortal king felt the power of the black broadsword, his left hand reached towards his head. There is still something missing. The primordial immortal king muttered to himself, his gaze following to the great heavenly spirit land, his eyes fixing there, the corners of his mouth lifting, and then he vanished into thin air. The supreme sect within the outer gate city. Guan was listening with great interest. With the information obtained from Dixie's mouth, the supreme sect had indeed become powerful, even extending a vast network of relationships overseas. It all revolved around one person, Sword Venerable Fudao. Overseas powers, out of respect for Sword Venerable Fudao, responded very enthusiastically to the supreme sect's attempts at forging alliances, especially after Sword Venerable Fudao took action. This enthusiasm rose to a whole new level. Dixie was about to recount last year's battle on Golden Scorpion Island, where the supreme sect had established no small reputation, proving that, even without Sword Venerable Fudao's intervention, their strength was formidable. Boom! A figure descended from the sky, crashing down onto the street behind Guan, sending stones flying, and cultivators nearby were blown away. Guan's robe, too, was fluttered by the blast. Dixie's pupils suddenly dilated. He immediately flashed behind Guan, shielding him. But the next second, he regretted it because he saw the true face of the comer. It was the primordial immortal king. The roaring figure of the primordial immortal king was still imprinted in the sky, and the surrounding cultivators instinctively looked up, and then back at the primordial immortal king. Whoosh! The cultivators scattered like a receding tide, with some even leaping up, flying towards the distance. Dixie, however, stood rooted to the spot, his legs as if they were filled with lead, unable to move. He was afraid, but for some unfathomable reason he did not run away. All he could hear were his heartbeat. The primordial immortal king looked emotionless as he stared at Guan. In front of him, both Wuxia and Guan seemed so insignificant, the disparity between their auras vast. Junior, do you know the origin of the crown you wear? Hearing the primordial immortal king's inquiry, Guan turned and looked at him, then pointed to his own immortal king crown and asked, "Could it be that this crown belongs to you?" The primordial immortal king's lips curled up as he said, "That's right, it's mine. This treasure was crafted by me when I stepped into the 9th level of the immortal path. It is called the Immortal King Crown, and it is capable of swallowing the chi blood of living beings, storing mana. 9th level of the immortal path. Immortal path supreme treasure." Upon hearing this, Wuxia nearly died of fright, with large beads of cold sweat covering his face. Such an entity, he had no power to resist it. Not just him, the entire supreme sect might face the danger of annihilation. He even began to resent Guan. How could you pick up such a crown with such a history? He had already been puzzled before, noticing that Guan's immortal king crown had many notches, obviously meant for setting jewels. Yet the fool hadn't done so because they simply wouldn't fit. Guan looked at the primordial immortal king and asked, "So? You want it back?" Cultivators in all directions watched tensely, and although the primordial immortal king was fearsome, this was the supreme sect, where many disciples bore the responsibility of protecting their sect. Hearing Guan's words, they cursed inwardly. Has this kid gone mad? To actually provoke such a terrifying entity. The primordial immortal king narrowed his eyes, sizing up Guan. The primordial immortal king has become hostile toward you, wanting to grind you to dust. Would you like to use lifespan detection on him? Guan chose to probe conveniently. Primordial immortal king, 9 layers of the free immortal realm 0/0/0. All zeros. Not a living thing. Guan felt a pang of regret in his heart. The primordial immortal king was worth less to him than a chi cultivation realm cultivator, right before his eyes. The primordial immortal king took a step forward, coming before Wuxia, whose pupils trembled violently, his body shaking as he was engulfed by shadow. Looking down at Wuxia, the primordial immortal king said coldly, "Mortal, you seek to block my path?" In the distance, figures appeared, all great cultivators of the supreme sect, including the 9-fingered divine lord and Shinshinzi. They looked at the primordial immortal king, their hearts pounding with fear. Such a terrifying aura. Who exactly is this person? Wuxia was unrecognizable compared to his usual self, appearing so bedraggled. He wished to speak, even if just to beg for mercy, yet he couldn't muster the strength to do so. And it wasn't just him. Cultivators from the supreme sect all around remained silent as cicadas in winter, not daring to make a move. The fact that they chose not to flee already showcased their utmost courage. Neo, the primordial immortal king's gaze turned stern, his voice thunderous like a roaring explosion, startling everyone to tremble. Wuxia turned pale with fright, his legs went weak, and he collapsed. But just as his knees were about to touch the ground, a hand from behind grabbed his arm, pulling him back up. It was Guan. While holding Wuxia, Guan looked towards the primordial immortal king. The 9-fingered divine lord, perched on a rooftop afar, was secretly shocked. Who in the world was this kid? Having a vivid memory of Guan's recent standoff with the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor, he became curious about Guan, though he dared not inquire. Wuxia, gripped by Guan, inexplicably felt a sense of relief wash over him. He turned to look at Guan, wanting to say something, but upon seeing Guan's stern face, he found himself speechless. He was overwhelmed by Guan's demeanor. He couldn't help but feel an involuntary awe in his heart. The primordial immortal king looked at Guan, his eyes flashing with a strange light. He raised the black greatsword in his hand, holding it high above his head, ready to strike Guan. Be careful. A supreme sect disciple shouted out loud, having once been a disciple of the Third Medicine Valley, and forever grateful to Guan. Seeing Guan in danger, he instinctively warned him. That was all he could do. Guan slightly tilted his head, staring at the primordial immortal king, and said, "I'll give you one chance to strike, just one." Upon hearing this, A chill shot through the primordial immortal king's eyes. He twisted his wrist and savagely brought the sword down. Half kneeling, Wuxia looked up, his eyes obscured by the black sword, his face filled with despair. Boom! The sword struck down. The black greatsword instantly dissipated, and along with the primordial immortal king, it turned into ash. The terrifying surge of energy crushed the surrounding buildings, and even the clouds in the sky scattered. Guwen stood his ground, expression unchanged. Only his hair and robes fluttered ceaselessly, as if fierce flames were raging around him. Chapter 423 I am Sword Venerable Fu Dao. With the primordial immortal king turning to dust, the whole world seemed to suddenly quiet down. Supreme Sex cultivators were all left staring at Guwen, their eyes brimming with shock, while Wuxia, standing before Guwen, was dumbfounded, his body rigid. The nine-fingered Divine Lord and Shinshinzi were also as still as wooden chickens, unable to believe their own eyes. Guwen's face was expressionless, and there was a slight sense of regret in his heart. Could even a powerful free immortal not break through his protecting Tao divine essence? He did not strike back just now. The primordial immortal king was destroyed by his own power, and the protecting Tao divine essence, both body and soul, completely obliterated. Regrettably, since the primordial immortal king was not a living being, Guwen was unable to seize any lifespan. More and more figures appeared out of thin air, all of them great cultivators from the supreme sect. Looking at the street where Guwen was standing, they all frowned as the strong presence of the primordial immortal king still lingered in the air. Looking at the mess on the street, they couldn't help imagining the recent tumult. Guwen raised his right hand. Streaks of black air appeared out of nowhere, burrowing into the center of his palm. He then casually put his hand into his sleeve, and nobody saw what it truly was. He looked down at Wuxia and asked, "Brother D, are you all right?" Wuxia came back to his senses. With Guwen's help, he shakily stood up. Looking at Guwen, all was difficult to hide in his eyes. "You." Wuxia's lips quivered as he wanted to ask about Guwen's identity, but feared giving offense. "Sword Venerable Fu Dao." A cry of shock came from afar. As the words were spoken, the quiet was broken, and noise rose from all around, rapidly turning into an uproar. Wuxia also guessed this. The primordial immortal king claimed to possess the 9 heavens of immortal path cultivation level. Who else could slay an entity with such mastery within the supreme sect, if not Sword Venerable Fu Dao? He turned out to be Sword Venerable Fu Dao. Wuxia looked at Guwen, whose smile was mild. His Taoist heart could not calm down. Recalling the years of interaction with Guwen, he felt ashamed and frightened. Thankfully, he had never looked down on Guwen, as he had never been disrespectful in their exchanges. Guwen couldn't hear his inner voice but could probably guess it. For Guwen, it was just amusing. There was no feeling of being slapped in the face. He always enjoyed socializing and never demanded too much. A smile from others was already nice. There was no need to ask for more. Is he Sword Venerable Fu Dao? No, it's more likely that Sword Venerable Fu Dao protected him. Indeed, we didn't see him take action. It must have been Sword Venerable Fu Dao who acted. That man is Guwen, the Valley Master of the Third Medicine Valley. Go Chess and Gomoku were all invented by him. I know him. He definitely isn't Sword Venerable Fu Dao. I've also known him for hundreds of years. He is extremely kind-hearted. Perhaps he has met Sword Venerable Fu Dao, who is incognito, so Sword Venerable Fu Dao came to his aid. I wonder if that guy just now is dead. As more and more disciples began to talk, the tone quickly changed. With the voices of people familiar with Guwen speaking up, many believed that it was Sword Venerable Fu Dao who had protected Guwen, not that he was Sword Venerable Fu Dao himself. Of course, some still thought that Guwen was Sword Venerable Fu Dao, because he was too composed in the face of the primordial immortal king. Even if he was not Sword Venerable Fu Dao, he must have a close relationship with him. Otherwise, he could not be so fearless. LV Baitian, Ji Hantian, Gu Zong, and other high-ranking members also appeared one after another. Upon seeing Guwen, LV Baitian breathed a sigh of relief. He gave Ji Hantian an instruction and then appeared beside Guwen. "Let's talk somewhere else," LV Baitian said in a low voice, glancing at Wuxia with a look full of mystery. Guwen nodded slightly. then followed LV Batian away. As Xia watched Guan's retreating figure, he was about to speak when two figures appeared out of nowhere in front of him. "Come with us," one of them said coldly. The oppressive feeling of the immortal path realm enveloped Xia, leaving him no choice but to comply. The street was quickly sealed off, the spectators were dispersed, the celestial phenomenon above, and the remaining clouds gradually disappeared, and the snow continued to fall. Streams of shooting stars lit up the sky, figures emerging from the reincarnation vortex. They were descending into the great heavenly spirit land everywhere. "Is it over? What happened?" the ancient immortal emperor asked, furrowing his brows, still alone with the Yangxian emperor in the great hall. Yangxian emperor also sensed that the presence of the primordial immortal king had abruptly ceased. He pondered and said, "Probably Sword Venerable Fudao made a move." The place of the primordial immortal king's descent, Yangxian emperor would not forget. That was a place that brought shame to the immortal dynasty. Slain by Sword Venerable Fudao, a powerful heavenly spirit, the immortal dynasty dared not seek revenge, a situation that naturally caused extreme dissatisfaction within its ranks, towards the higher-ups, and towards Yangxian emperor. Although Yangxian emperor was wary of Sword Venerable Fudao, he did not expect Sword Venerable Fudao to cause the momentum of the primordial immortal king to vanish so quickly. Taitsong continent. What exactly happened there? Yangxian emperor suddenly wanted to take a trip there. At this moment, not only he but even the holy minister of the holy court wished to visit the supreme sect. Such a domineering primordial immortal king. It was not likely that he would have subdued his presence upon arrival. It was highly possible he had been suppressed. Sword Venerable Fudao, who exactly are you, a sacred being, and what is the purpose of hiding your identity? The holy minister sat on his sacred chair, his gaze deep in thought. The holy gods in the hall were also discussing the matter. The sudden disappearance of the aura of the primordial immortal king made them uneasy, regardless of the outcome. An hour later, Guan leisurely returned to the Third Medicine Valley. Just as he got back, he was surrounded by a throng of disciples. News about what had happened in the outer gate city spread rapidly. Guan's name, and that of Sword Venerable Fudao were widely circulated, though stories varied. However, one thing was certain, Guan was very likely related to Sword Venerable Fudao. The disciples had heard before that their master's cultivation level was extraordinary. Now hearing this, how could they not be excited? Facing their inquiries, Guan said helplessly, "I must confess, I am Sword Venerable Fudao. I have always interacted with you in the guise of an ordinary valley master of Medicine Valley, but in return, you have not shown enough reverence for me." This intervention was unexpected. As soon as these words were uttered, they immediately provoked exclamations from the disciples. Yu Yingying in the crowd couldn't help but snort. What an act! She also harbored doubts in her heart. Previously, Shin Xinzi had wanted to kill her, but then suddenly stopped. Could it be related to Guan? Is Guan truly Sword Venerable Fudao? That should not be the case. She had heard from Xian Tianyi about his life story, and he was just over 700 years old now. At such an age, how could he be Sword Venerable Fudao? His flippant tone made it impossible for her to speculate wildly. Not just her, the other disciples also felt that way, always feeling that Guan seemed to be joking. Guan did not elaborate further, letting them guess. Was it true or false? Letting a bit of suspense remain in life was rather interesting. It's worth mentioning that previously, LV Batian had assured him that he would find a way to suppress this incident. LV Batian thought that Guan's intervention was to protect the supreme sect. Of course, he had more reasons hidden in his heart. He feared the exposure of Sword Venerable Fudao's true identity, which was also the thought of the supreme sect's core leadership. If other powers learned of Sword Venerable Fudao's true identity, that would not be good. They were not afraid of Sword Venerable Fudao getting into trouble, but rather someone enticing him away. The Holy Court was the best example. Guan freed himself from the disciples' entanglement, and went to his own loft, and then was properly blocked by Ji Xiaoyu. Was that commotion caused by you? Ji Xiaoyu asked. Guan shook his head and said, "Somebody fell from the sky, wanted to steal my crown. He was about to chop at me. Then suddenly he vanished. As he spoke, he patted his chest, showing a scared expression. Ji Xiaoyu, pensive, couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity with Gu An's description. Seeing her distracted, Guan didn't continue talking and entered alone. When Guan closed the door, Ji Xiaoyu was startled awake. She turned her head to look at the second-floor door, her eyes filled with disbelief. Could it be the Heaven and Earth Path Gang? Even so, to think of extinguishing such an existence. Ji Xiaoyu was filled with shock, Guan becoming incredibly mysterious in her mind. As time passed, the incident at the outer gate city quickly spread, and even with the efforts of the Supreme Sect to suppress it, the name couldn't be stopped. Various powers heard of one name, Guan. After returning to his room, Guan took up the Green Hero Travelogue. He could feel that the followers of the primordial immortal king had all descended to the mortal world, and they were going to bring disaster. He had no interventionist ideas, because this disaster would cause the immortal dynasty and the holy court to temporarily cease hostilities, which was actually a good thing. The immortal dynasty and holy court's war affected even more creatures. Moreover, with Gu An's current insight into the laws of fate and karma, he could see farther calamities. No matter how he intervened, the fate of the great heavenly spirit land would never disappear permanently. There is birth and death, fortune and misfortune. These are the laws of all things in great heaven and earth. After the extinguishing of the primordial immortal king, the winter snow fell even heavier. In the following days, more and more people came to the Third Medicine Valley for go games and visits to see Guan. Guan didn't meet with strangers. He continued to linger in his various medicine valleys, harvesting medicinal herbs. When he went to the Nianchu cave, Tian Yaoer and the other two girls inquired about the roaring of the primordial immortal king. He comforted them briefly, and then began to give them guidance in their cultivation. Life was quite busy. Apart from picking medicinal herbs, Guan also had to teach Tian Yaoer, Tian Qing, Tian Bai, and an Xian. Aside from that, he had to take time to cultivate and nurture his body. In the blink of an eye, the Spring Festival arrived. On the morning of the Spring Festival, Guan made a trip to the inner sect city, drinking with Wuju at an inn while listening to a storyteller talk about overseas matters. That immortal Lord Qin is said to be an ancient great power from 10 million years ago, resurrected from reincarnation, needing to devour the souls of countless immortal cultivators to reconstruct his body. The storyteller's tone was filled with emotional provocation. Even Guan and Wuju were captivated by his words. Wuju turned his head to look at Guan, curiously asking, "What exactly is your relationship with Sword Venerable Fu Dao?" Guan glanced at him and said, "I am Sword Venerable Fu Dao. What do you mean by what relation? How could that be? I've watched you grow from the foundation establishment realm to today. If you are Sword Venerable Fu Dao, then I must be the Yangxian Emperor." Wuju exclaimed with wide eyes. Gu An's gaze followed to the stairway entrance. Someone was coming up. Yangxian Emperor, Free Immortal Realm Level 16, 908, 922/50, 000, 000/100, 000,000. Chapter 424. Giving face to seniors over 6 million years old, a free immortal. A lifespan of 50 million years. The ultimate lifespan of 100 million years. Truly worthy of being the current lord of the immortal dynasty. Guan looked at Yangxian Emperor, and felt deeply moved as these numbers demonstrated the emperor's formidable power. Wuju continued to refer to himself as the Yangxian Emperor, oblivious to the true Yangxian Emperor approaching. The Yangxian Emperor, dressed in a purple robe with a handsome face, exuded a transcendent aura even without donning the golden robe and crown of an immortal emperor. His eyes were particularly bright and piercing, his brows hardly concealing his pride. The arrogance nurtured over millions of years made him unforgettable at a glance. The Yangxian Emperor did not glance around the second floor, his gaze fixed directly on Guan. He walked towards Guan, reaching Wuju's side, and upon hearing the name, Yangxian Emperor mentioned, he remained unperturbed. Looking at Guan, he extended his hand in greeting and said, "Daoist friend, may I sit and chat with you?" Guan glanced at him and nodded slightly, following which the Yangxian Emperor sat down. Wu Ju observed the Yangxian emperor, sensing an extraordinary poise in him. Do you know each other? Wu Ju curiously asked, aware of Gu An's strong networking skills and friendships across the supreme sect, which he greatly admired. Before displaying his talent, he had not one friend. Guan replied, we do not know each other, but to meet is fate, is it not? Upon hearing this, the Yangxian emperor smiled and nodded in agreement. Guan waved his right hand, and a jug of wine rose up, settling gently in front of the Yangxian emperor. Drink this jug of wine, and see if you would like to be friends with us, Guan said nonchalantly. Previously, when Qiushi Immortal Lord had come to trouble him, even if not arranged by the Yangxian emperor, as the lord of the immortal dynasty, he couldn't disassociate from the causal relations. The Yangxian emperor narrowed his eyes upon hearing this. Naturally, he wasn't going to drink the wine, but Gu An's intention was to constrain him. Facing Guan, he could only discern that Gu An's cultivation level was in the nascent soul realm, unable to spot any loopholes. If Guan truly was Sword Venerable Fudao, their gap in cultivation level was undoubtedly enormous. He hesitated for a moment before opening the jug and lifting it, beginning to drink heartily. Wu Ju looked skeptically between Guan and the Yangxian emperor, witnessing for the first time Guan putting someone in a difficult position. Who is this person? Could he be a scion of a family that had offended Guan? The Yangxian emperor drank swiftly, and once he set down the jug, Guan picked up a new one and began drinking alone. Seeing this, any trace of discomfort in the Yangxian emperor's heart instantly dissipated, a smile appearing on his face. Adversaries should resolve and not agitate conflicts. He and Sword Venerable Fudao had no direct enmity. Qiushi Immortal Lord had acted rashly. Although this incident had cost him face, Sword Venerable's power was enough for him to concede some face. Though he was proud and considered his talent unparalleled in the world, he was only several million years old, and beings like Sword Venerable Fudao had likely lived tens of millions, or even hundreds of millions of years. He should yield some respect to his predecessor. After finishing his drink, Guan put down the jug and started making casual conversation with the Yangxian emperor. The two tactfully avoided revealing their true identities, acting as if genuinely curious about each other. Wu Ju joined in, guided by Guan, and they returned to discussing the Yangxian emperor. Wu Ju admired the Yangxian emperor, who had faced interventions from the Holy Court during his tribulation crossing, and had boldly initiated war. Perhaps it was a calculated move, but it was done openly, which he liked about the Yangxian emperor. For some reason, Guan felt like he was being scolded. Little bastard, who says he isn't straightforward and honorable. The Yangxian emperor, however, was all smiles, finding Wu Ju more and more agreeable. The three drank and chatted, growing familiar with one another, when Guan sighed. I feel like we were born in the wrong era. Why does it seem like our generation always faces endless tribulations? Wu Ju nodded, sharing the sentiment. The Yangxian emperor said, every generation feels like this, remembering only the hardships. But such is life, continuously experiencing trials. He thought Sword Venerable Fudao was hinting at him, and felt compelled to explain. With the immortal dynasty and holy court vying for power, the world seems embroiled in great turmoil, but in fact, friction between the two powers had always existed. To the major sects, the past might have seemed peaceful, but for the common people, every century brought various hardships. It is said when immortals fight, mortals suffer, and the battles between immortal path cultivators also bring disasters to mortals. Our very reason for pursuing immortal cultivation is to withstand the incessant trials that follow. The Yangxian emperor earnestly stated, clearly implying that the turmoil between the immortal dynasty and holy court affected the world's structure. Yet for ordinary beings, it's just a change in who causes their sufferings. Life is always filled with suffering, a common worldly norm. Wu Ju felt this made sense, and remarked thoughtfully, who knows how long this tribulation will last? It always feels like it will be difficult to end within 100 or even 1,000 years. Of course, because this great heaven and earth is too vast, far beyond your imagination. In ancient times, when the primordial immortal king unified the great heaven and earth, it took 1,000,000 years. When the holy court rose and swept across the world, pushing back the immortal dynasty. It took 3 million years. The battles of heaven and earth are beyond mortal comprehension. The Yongxian emperor replied, nodding. This response made Wuju look at him quizzically. This person seems very knowledgeable. What is his origin? Suddenly, Guan asked. Do you think in the struggle between the immortal dynasty and holy court, they might both end up weakened, leading to a new ruling power in the great heaven and earth? Yongxian emperor's expression suddenly turned unnatural, and his gaze toward Guan became complex. Wuju frowned and said, That's not possible, right? Is there any other sect that can compare with them? Now there isn't, but what about in 10,000, 100,000, or 1,000,000 years? Guan shook his head. He paused, then added, Besides, I've heard that strong beings always descend from outer heaven, and even heavenly demons reincarnate in the mortal world. Couldn't they be preparing their own forces? Wuju frowned, thinking there was reason in Gu An's words. Yongxian emperor's complexion returned to normal. It turned out Sword Venerable Fudao was reminding him of threats from outer heaven. He was actually worried that Sword Venerable Fudao was going to support Supreme Sect. In fact, without Gu An's mention, he had always been worried. The primordial immortal king was the best example. Though a fallen spirit of the immortal dynasty, he knew nothing about it. He even felt that there were unknown forces stirring within the immortal dynasty. He couldn't help but think back to those immortal spirits who had supported him in starting the war, each one of them seeming suspicious. The storyteller's voice continued to spread, but the trio's conversation didn't attract anyone else's attention because the inn was filled with people boasting. However, after drinking for nearly an hour, new guests arrived, recognized Guan, and enthusiastically engaged him in conversation. Since the battle initiated by the primordial immortal king, many knew of the close relationship between Guan and Sword Venerable Fudao. Yongxian Emperor watched Guan interacting with the lowly cultivators, and suddenly had a realization. This man was terrifyingly strong, yet he could lower himself to mingle with mortals without them noticing a thing. His Taoist heart was unfathomable. Of course, he didn't think much of this approach since he believed more in the supremacy of the strong. The weak should merely serve as foils to the strong. An hour later, Guan and his companions left the inn, and Guan invited Yongxian Emperor to spend the spring festival in Third Medicine Valley. Yongxian Emperor did not refuse. He also had more to discuss with Guan. Both returned to the Third Medicine Valley. Upon arriving, Yongxian Emperor's gaze became complicated. Divine thought, true immortal, reincarnation, tribulation aura, and mortals with strong chi blood and not a trace of spiritual power. He even saw 2 reincarnated heavenly demons. Something was off about this valley. The Third Medicine Valley was festively decorated. Even Ji Xiaoyu and the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor, who rarely shunned cultivation, were playing chess with disciples everywhere. The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor turned his head toward Guan. His pupils contracted sharply on seeing Yongxian Emperor. His first instinct was to flee, but then remembering Gu An's strength, he reassured himself. Guan would protect him. There was no need to be afraid here. Would Yongxian Emperor dare oppose Sword Venerable Fudao? That day, the aura of the primordial immortal king was overwhelmingly strong, yet he was reduced to ashes before Sword Venerable Fudao. From that day on, Guan was regarded by the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor as the most powerful being in the great heavenly spirit land. He even suspected Guan was Shengtian. Apart from Shengtian, who else in the great heavenly spirit land could be so powerful? The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor diverted his gaze and continued to play chess with the 9-fingered Divine Lord, who was visibly upset and indecisive in his moves. Guan walked further into Medicine Valley, introducing the situation of the Third Medicine Valley to Yongxian Emperor. Yongxian Emperor grew interested in the Third Medicine Valley. Subsequently, Guan asked Longqing to entertain Yongxian Emperor. He had himself to meet Xinjun. Xinjun was messing around in his bookshelf again. Ever since learning about Gu An's strength, Longqing had taken very seriously any tasks given by Guan. This was his chance to perform. He was very enthusiastic with Yongxian Emperor, who found him quite interesting as well. Not sure why, Yongxian Emperor felt that Longqing seemed familiar, as if he had met him in a previous life. He guessed that he might have encountered Longqing's past life. However, this was Sword Venerable Fudao's territory, and Longqing addressed him as master, so Yangxian Emperor wouldn't dare act recklessly. As dusk approached, all disciples gathered in the loft area. Some sat drinking, others stood arm in arm, and yet others were sparring to enhance the festive mood, keeping the atmosphere lively. Yangxian Emperor's attention was on Guan. He saw Guan surrounded by Shenzhen, Zhenqin, Yilan, Ji Xiaoyu, and an Xian, with Shenzhen and Zhenqin directly beside him, sparring verbally. Zhenqin was nearly putting her feet on the table. This gave Yangxian Emperor a deeper understanding of Sword Venerable Fudao. This man truly was a hidden hermit. Yilan watched Zhenqin verbally sparring with Shenzhen, a smile on her face. Not that she found Zhenqin's actions appropriate, she simply enjoyed the atmosphere. It was different from the subsect where people revered her, making her feel as though she had returned to Mystic Valley 700 years ago. After so many years, how could recalling the original intentions not be wonderful? Ji Xiaoyu watched Guan intently. He could see the displeasure in her eyes. What could he do? Everyone insisted on coming to Third Medicine Valley to celebrate the festival with him. It was unstoppable. At least Jiang Qiong was better, waiting for him in the 8 scenic caves. How good it was to interact privately. More crowds always lead to trouble. Chapter 425 Xianyu Divine Dynasty, Sky Demon Great Sect. After the festival, Guan went to Mystic Valley on his own. He wasn't worried about Yangxian Emperor causing trouble in the Third Medicine Valley. If Yangxian Emperor dared to entertain such thoughts, Guan could make him disappear in an instant, even erasing all his karma, making all beings forget the Yangxian Emperor ever existed. When Shengtian and Jiangshi saw Guan, they were extremely excited. Guan had initially planned to just go through the motions, but he didn't expect them to be so thrilled. Thus, Guan let the two of them demonstrate their recent cultivation results, then gave them guidance one by one, to their immense surprise and delight. After fussing around for an ancient hour, Guan finally entered the 8 scenic caves. He emerged from the grotto and in the distance he saw the immense green vine tree, with a young woman in green, swinging under it. It was Jiang Qiong. She was barefoot, with no jewelry on her hands. Her long hair casually draped over her shoulders, exuding an aura of pure innocence, unlike her past demeanor as the demon cultivator of the Thousand Autumn Pavilion. She turned her head, and upon seeing Guan approaching, she couldn't help but snort coldly. As Guan drew near, Jiang Qiong couldn't resist mocking. "Where were you indulging yourself last night?" Guan didn't indulge her, and replied gruffly, "Do you need something from me? Aren't you the sect master of Juhua sect? I heard your sect also celebrates the spring festival. Shouldn't you be overseeing everything?" "What's there to oversee? I've raised so many people. It's time I took a break," huffed Jiang Qiong. She stood up, her feet pressing into the grass. Her eyes gleaming. She suddenly lifted her right foot, trying to brush the grass off onto Guan, but he dodged it. "So I've heard you calling yourself Sword Venerable Fudao?" Jiang Qiong watched Guan closely, her eyes sparkling. She had intended to catch him off guard, yet Guan had still avoided it. This kid really was no ordinary person. Guan kept his distance and countered, "Indeed, what about it?" Jiang Qiong obviously didn't believe it, because Sword Venerable Fudao had personally told her that Guan was his disciple. She only felt their master-disciple relationship was quite strong. "It seems Sword Venerable Fudao is ready to take action. Putting you in front, you should be careful. Even with him backing you up, beware of hidden attacks. When dealing with others, try not to be too impulsive," Jiang Qiong cautioned. Guan helplessly responded, "Please, do I need you to teach me in this area? Who was it that got kicked out of the Taizong dynasty on the spot?" Jiang Qiong was immediately displeased and started chasing after Guan. But no matter how she tried, she couldn't catch up. She got serious, chasing Guan at full speed, while he continued to evade her. As the chase went on, Jiang Qiong fell into a profound state, seeing Guan as a series of shadows in her eyes. His figure and step technique seemed so agile and enticing. Who knows how much time had passed? Jiang Qiong suddenly snapped awake to find herself under the green vine tree. while Guan was in front of her, practicing alchemy. She took a deep breath and asked, "What was that just now?" "A step technique. Once mastered, you could be unrivaled in the world," Guan answered casually without turning around. What he had taught was the eternal measuring heaven Dao step, an advanced version of the stepping path of ages step. Aside from himself, no one else had learned it yet. Towards Yilan and Zhenqin, Guan could only encourage them to pursue their cultivation level as far as possible, and to cultivate other Taoist sorceries only after reaching nirvana. Jiang Qiong was different. Her maximum lifespan was over 5,000 years. She would certainly achieve nirvana, so learning divine skills in advance wouldn't delay her cultivation. "What's it called?" Jiang Qiong asked curiously. Certain such a precise step technique had to be an inheritance from Sword Venerable Fu Dao. Guan glanced at her and said, "Eternal measuring heaven Dao step. Don't spread it around or it'll bring big trouble, and I mean trouble from beyond this world." Upon hearing this, Jiang Qiong became both nervous and excited. She eagerly pounced towards Guan. She hugged Guan tightly, wanting to plant a kiss on his face, but was blocked by his palm. Instead, she ended up kissing his palm, tickling him. "I haven't loved you for nothing, rest assured. I will definitely succeed," Jiang Qiong said joyfully. Guan pushed her away and said, "Then you'd better start practicing now. To master this divine skill, I'm afraid it might take 1,000 or even 10,000 years." Jiang Qiong didn't believe it and immediately got up to begin her cultivation. Guan turned his gaze back to the pill furnace. Below the pill furnace, the flames flickered, burning out only to reignite, continuously cycling through a state of reincarnation. With time flying like an arrow, Guan once again seated himself in front of the pill furnace, kindled the fire, and turned his head to look. Jiang Qiong's figure shifted about, resembling a white swan, elusive and difficult to track. She suddenly appeared beside Guan, her right hand to her forehead, followed by a fall, her hands clasping Guan's upper body, resting her head on his shoulder. "Why, after 100 years of practice, can I still not even enter the threshold?" Jiang Qiong said in anguish. It had been a century since she had received the eternal measuring heaven Dao step, and over the years, she diligently cultivated but failed to grasp it, so she came to Guan for advice. She had just demonstrated it, and with her mystic heart realm cultivation level, she couldn't even take 20 steps. Guan remained leaned upon and said, "I've told you before, this divine skill isn't so simple to master. The fact that you can take so many steps already proves your diligence." Jiang Qiong sighed, dispirited. After resting for a while, she brought up worldly affairs. The reincarnation shadows brought by the primordial immortal king wreaked havoc everywhere in the mortal world, and they were given a unified name, Xianyu Wraiths. A century had passed, and rather than being eradicated, the Xianyu Wraiths had grown stronger, and had even established the Xianyu Divine Dynasty. Apart from the Xianyu Divine Dynasty, a sect named the Sky Demon Great Sect appeared in the mortal world, supposedly all reincarnations of heavenly demons. While the Immortal Dynasty and Holy Court were struggling against each other, they spared efforts to confront the Xianyu Divine Dynasty and the Sky Demon Great Sect. Not only did they not succeed, but they also suffered repeated defeats, allowing the enemies to gain tremendous momentum. Now the Immortal Dynasty and Holy Court had begun to cease their wars, turning their spears towards the Xianyu Divine Dynasty and the Sky Demon Great Sect, and the mortal world faced new uncertainties. The Taitsong continent remained unaffected, but its sects saw this as an opportunity to vie for resources. Outside their realm, Sword Venerable Fu Dao would not protect them, nor would overseas powers indulge them. The Juhua sect was one among these, constantly expanding their reach. Last year, they encountered a demon of the Sky Demon Great Sect, and lost tens of thousands of disciples in the fray. This incident enraged the Juhua sect, but the power gap made them wary of seeking revenge. Jiang Qiong was telling Guan all this not to seek help, but just to discuss the outside situation, and Guan had no intention of intervening. Over the years, the reincarnation vortex continually spawned Xianyu Wraiths, bolstering the strength of the Xianyu Divine Dynasty. Certainly, there were great karmic forces at play behind this. Who knows if the Immortal Dynasty and Holy Court have really reconciled? They would do well to join forces and expel these two powers, otherwise, the consequences are unthinkable, Jiang Qiong said worriedly. Guan, while refining an elixir, replied, "Don't worry, I will talk to the Yangxian Emperor." Jiang Qiong blinked in surprise and asked, "Are you talking about the sovereign of the immortal dynasty?" "Yes, what about it?" "You're bluffing, making it sound as if you can meet him just like that." "You think I can't? Even if you have Sword Venerable Fu Dao as your mentor, he's far away in the immortal dynasty." "It'll take you to meet him today. Why don't you ask him yourself, okay?" Guan rolled his eyes at Jiang Qiong, speaking in a mocking tone. She dared to look down on him. He was no longer the Ji family house servant of yesteryear. He had to show this woman some of his true power. Chapter 426. The Orthodox of Heaven and Earth. Guan brought Jiang Qiong to the Third Medicine Valley, and they made their way to the dojo. Along the way, Jiang Qiong looked around curiously, intrigued by the current state of the Third Medicine Valley. Since the news about Gu An's connection with Sword Venerable Fu Dao had spread, more people had been coming to the Third Medicine Valley, and the Supreme Sect had expanded it, continuously increasing the number of disciples in the valley. Now, the number of Medicine Valley disciples had surpassed 4,000. At first glance, the Third Medicine Valley seemed like a sect. Jiang Qiong sensed many cultivators with a stronger presence than herself, which made her even more curious about Gu An's current status. Guan approached a senior disciple from behind and tapped him on the shoulder, signaling him to leave. The senior disciple, upon seeing him, immediately felt relieved, quickly stood up to salute, then hurried away. Guan sat down and looked across at the Yangxian Emperor, asking, "You've been here for 100 years, aren't you going back?" Jiang Qiong stood next to Guan, casting a strange look towards Yangxian Emperor. Could it be that the Emperor of the Immortal Dynasty was him? Although the Yangxian Emperor had concealed his cultivation level, the sheer grandeur he emanated was extraordinary. Yangxian Emperor looked at Guan and smilingly asked, "Go back for what?" Comprehending the great Tao here is quite good. He had been in Third Medicine Valley for 100 years. Initially, he was curious why Sword Venerable Fu Dao would choose to stay hidden in such a modest place, but gradually, he was attracted to the lifestyle here. The disciples working, cultivating, falling in love. Their every action symbolized the laws of the great heaven and earth. Everything in this Medicine Valley seemed to contain some aspect of the Taoist intent. His feelings were not a mere illusion, but were influenced by Gu An's Tao fruit in the surroundings. The so-called Tao fruit is also a pathway of Tao, representing the fruits of chasing the Tao by living beings. Even though Guan had concealed his cultivation level, the aura of Xianyuan Zizai Xian still prevailed, and his Xianyuan Tao fruit also influenced everything around him. This was why the Medicine Valley disciples' cultivation speed was increasing, with geniuses emerging almost every year. These geniuses might not stand out in today's Supreme Sect, but would have been famous 800 years ago and heavily nurtured by the sect. Guan was also aware of his own impact on the surroundings, unable to control it. He only opted to feign ignorance, kind of a care towards the people around. Now that the Xianyu Divine Dynasty and the Sky Demon Great Sect have emerged, the threat to the Immortal Dynasty, the Holy Court, and even the whole world is not small, Guan stated, then glanced at Jiang Qiong. "You are normally quite talkative. Why the silence now?" Jiang Qiong was skeptical and didn't just blurt out anything, plus she never really intended to seek out the Yangxian Emperor. She just wanted a topic to discuss with Guan. Yangxian Emperor replied, "The world is in chaos. It's normal for variables to emerge, let them be." He watched Guan make his move on the board, his gaze subtly changing. He was about to win this game, but with Gu An's move, the situation on the board shifted. Though it wasn't a resurrection from death, it made him sense danger. It seems the Immortal Dynasty is not shouldering the mission of all living beings, rather pursuing the victory of the major trends. Guan muttered with a slight smile. Yangxian Emperor perceived the implications in his words. He didn't avoid them but rather said, "In different periods the targets pursued will vary. Whether it's the Immortal Dynasty or the Holy Court, when they first rose, they surely won the hearts of the people and shouldered the mission of protecting all living beings. But once you unify the world and become the Lord of all, you will become the common enemy of all beings in misery. There's no power in this world that can satisfy all living beings. From my perspective, the immortal dynasty should pursue other things, like the legitimacy of the great heavenly spirit land. Guan remembered the immortal dynasty's spirits once said that the holy court was established by beings from outer heaven. For the immortal dynasty, no matter how well the holy court did, they wanted to overturn it, as it concerned the honor and disgrace of the immortal dynasty. Some things are more important than peace. After hearing this, Guan made no comment. Different stances naturally lead to different perspectives on matters. Since Yangxian Emperor was already aware of the chaos in the outside world, that was sufficient. In Gu An's eyes, both the immortal dynasty and the holy court were headed towards destruction. He could see far into the future. Everything has its destiny, including the current supreme sect he was in. Guan had no intention of making the supreme sect last forever, knowing that one day, as old friends departed, the sect would lose its significance to him. Without the supreme sect, he could still flourish elsewhere. He wasn't worried at all. The deeper he delved into causality and fate, the fewer burdens Guan felt. Of course, Guan did not resist this change in mentality. To live in this world, one should not be entangled by too many emotions and unnecessary worries. Jiang Qiong also pondered the words of Yangxian Emperor, curious about what he meant by the legitimacy of heaven and earth. Guan didn't linger. The current game couldn't be saved, his moves were just for play. He stood up and took Jiang Qiong to leave. Yangxian Emperor watched the few ingenious moves made by Guan, contemplative. A breeze swept into the medicine valley, lifting leaves that swirled towards the sky. Spring had departed and summer arrived, warming the lands of great heaven and earth. On this day, Guan rode the blood prison Great Saint, bringing an exile to immortal-seeking island. The island master, Sun Hanfeng, personally greeted him, and soon Hu Xiaojian arrived too. With Gu An's support, Hu Xiaojian, now a cultivator of the void-crossing realm, despite years having passed and their relationship deepening, struggled to hide his excitement and joy in front of Guan, making it difficult for Guan to discern if it was an act. Guan asked Hu Xiaojian to take an exile and the blood prison Great Saint for a stroll, while he discussed matters privately with Sun Hanfeng. With them gone, Sun Hanfeng finally said, "Master, demon cultivators from the Sky Demon Great Sect have been infiltrating Immortal-Seeking Island frequently lately. I sense trouble brewing." Only places like the Taitsong continent, protected by mighty beings, were relatively safe. Immortal-Seeking Island, despite its strong foundations, inevitably attracted covetous eyes. Guan had foreseen a tribulation awaiting Immortal-Seeking Island, which was why he had chosen to come. "Do not worry, just manage the island calmly, no one will disturb Immortal-Seeking Island." Guan, holding his teacup, replied softly while blowing on the steam. Hearing this, Sun Hanfeng smiled. He was a disciple of Mortal World Peak, arranged by Guan to oversee Immortal-Seeking Island, and treated well by Guan. The benefits he reaped each year were not small, and now he truly valued Immortal-Seeking Island, not wanting mishaps to befall it. Shortly after, Sun Hanfeng brought up various other issues, mostly regarding internal disputes or power struggles on the island. Guan spent most of the time listening, and when Sun Hanfeng asked for advice, he did not hold back his opinions. When Sun Hanfeng finished, Guan gestured for him to leave. After Sun Hanfeng departed, Guan remained seated, looking out toward the blue sky, his gaze reaching beyond the heavens and earth. He was looking at an old friend. Tattered clouds hung like torn fabric across the sky, and figures exuding demonic chi hovered in midair. Among them, one with the most intense demonic chi had a giant red fireball, and deep red chains wriggling like snakes behind him. Their eyes were all fixated on a ruined and solitary island below, where trees were toppled and the ground upheaved, creating a pockmarked landscape. Dressed in black, Liya stood atop a pile of rubble, with a sword in his right hand and Divine Exotic City in his left, while Divine Exotic Immortal Spirit perched on his shoulder. "Zhao Xuehe, is that all the capacity you have? Capturing me won't be that easy," Liya taunted loudly, a cold expression between his brows. Zhao Xuehe stood in front of the red fireball, toying with the chains around him, an indifferent expression on his face, as he looked down at Leah. Leah, how long can you last relying on the power of divine exotic city? Join the Sky Demon Great Sect. Holy Court is not for you. You must sense the weariness of Holy Court. Without Xingtian, the chaos in Holy Court holds no merit for nurturing you. Leah frowned slightly upon hearing this. He had been in the holy position within Holy Court for many years, but had not reaped significant benefits. Recently, the chief fortune of his position was extracted, making his cultivation unstable. He had no choice but to venture out, partly to clear his mind. As Zhao Xuehe raised his right hand towards the sky, he said, "The sect hierarch of Sky Demon Great Sect has yet to arrive here. When he does, he will transform this realm. There's not much time left for you. If you don't leave Holy Court soon, you'll perish along with it." Leah, frustrated, retorted, "So? Is living a lowly life really better than death?" At this, a fierce light flashed in Zhao Zuhi's eyes. Leah said no more and tossed divine exotic city upwards. Quickly enlarging, it enveloped the whole island, emitting black mist from which divine souls and peculiar ghosts emerged, even revealing a colossal figure wielding an axe, instantly suppressing the momentum of the Sky Demon Great Sect's side. Divine exotic immortal spirit stood on Li Ya's shoulder, howling as if taunting the enemy. Zhao Xuehe huffed coldly, placing his right hand to his mouth, beginning to chant a spell. As he chanted, his own mana surged out, entering the red fireball behind him, which spouted explosions of intense flames and weird black spots wriggling on its surface. Just as the ghostly army burst forth from divine exotic city, the red fireball suddenly opened a chilling eye, freezing the whole realm as everything came to a standstill. While sipping tea, Guan observed that the Sky Demon Great Sect indeed possessed something powerful. Utilizing the power of the Silent Destruction domain, he secretly passed mana to divine exotic immortal spirit. The stronger it became, the stronger divine exotic city would be, leading both parties into a stalemate. He had noticed some mighty beings stirring within the Silent Destruction domain, eyeing the great heavenly spirit land. These entities only dared to peer and feared to step into great heaven and earth. This disappointed Guan. The Sky Demon Great Sect borrowed the power of the Silent Destruction domain, while Xianyu Divine Dynasty tapped into the power of the Reincarnation Vortex. Both forces still tested the waters, uncertain whether they feared him or Xingtian. Guan indeed looked forward to their descent. If they provoked him, it would be the perfect time to harvest lifespans. Time swiftly passed. After battling for 2 ancient hours, Leah had escaped the encirclement, barely surviving this tribulation. However, Guan foresaw that Leah would be entangled in vendettas for many years to come. "Senior brother Li, the next millennium won't be easy for you," Guan murmured to himself, then stood up and walked outside the hall. Chapter 427. Divine Emperor's Descent. Autumn breezes wafted through Mystic Valley. Guan sat on a tree branch, looking down at the sparring in the forest below. Jiang Shi and Xingtian were engaged in a close contest of martial moves and movement techniques. The master and disciple evenly matched. Jiang Shi possessed a maximum lifespan of 4,800 years, while Shengxin's lifespan could reach 5,000 years. Talent-wise, there wasn't a large gap between the two. After many years of cultivation, Xingtian had grown significantly. When it came to hand-to-hand combat, he could fight Jiang Shi to a standstill. However, their sparring didn't interest Guan much. Despite watching them, his thoughts were actually on Leah. Since escaping from a desperate situation, Leah had been chased by the Sky Demon Great Sect. Fortunately, no particularly strong entities had set their sights on him yet, and the strongest among his pursuers were only at the wandering immortal realm. Leah was currently engaged in battle. Most followers within the Sky Demon Great Sect were reincarnations of heavenly demons, awakening their original souls, but there were also some infiltrators from outer heaven who had descended as demons, nearly all of whom had cultivation levels above the immortal Dao 4th layer heaven. After years of warfare with the immortal dynasty, the Holy Court's control over outer heaven was weakening. Guan lifted his gaze and saw figures coming and going from the great heavenly spirit land without anyone daring to block them. In such circumstances, The Sky Demon Great Sect was rising swiftly, spreading across the world like a wildfire. Guan's immortal-seeking island would be affected in the future as well. Watching Liya battling fiercely, Guan's thoughts drifted to the future, contemplating an appropriate time to reap the growth of the Sky Demon Great Sect. Guan had no intention of blindly playing the savior, but if threatened, or if those he cared about were threatened, he would show no mercy. He lived in seclusion, but that didn't mean he would stand idly by. After observing Liya for a while longer, Guan's gaze shifted toward Anhao. Anhao was about to undergo nirvana. He was still imprisoned, waiting for the Yangxian Emperor to return. Once released, after his nirvana, Anhao would re-emerge into the world, embarking on the path of the heaven-favored. Compared to Liya, Anhao's journey would be smooth, continuing his past grace. Guan then turned his attention to other old acquaintances, and as he did, his thoughts suddenly turned to Xiaochuan and Yang Jian. Both had entered the reincarnation vortex, yet there had been no word from them, and Guan could no longer feel the destruction Dao seal on Xiaochuan's soul, indicating a great distance between them. After a long while, Jiangshi came to the base of the tree, looking up to ask, "Master, how did we perform just now?" And Shengtian also walked over, expectantly looking up at Guan. Guan withdrew his divine thought, glanced at them, and said thoughtfully, "In truth, both of your growth rates are rapid. You can be considered geniuses. You don't need to be so tense. There's no need to prove anything to me, strong or weak. As long as you don't betray me, I naturally won't abandon you." These two disciples had many merits, but every time they saw him, they became nervous, and they were eager to demonstrate their abilities, which made him feel uncomfortable. Upon hearing this, and Shengtian smiled, Jiangshi also let out a sigh of relief. Unlike an Xian and Longqing, they had sought Guan for their own gain, so they could never be at ease in front of him, always maintaining a deep reverence for him. Guan then added, "In a while I'll arrange for a disciple to spar with you. The two of you will take him on together, to broaden your horizons." On hearing this, and Shengshen's eyes brightened as he asked, "Is it a disciple from the Third Medicine Valley?" They had naturally heard of the Third Medicine Valley, but had never been there. Even though Mystic Valley had a transmission array platform, the disciples from the two valleys were not permitted to use it for visits, a rule set by Guan himself. Anyone who violated this rule was expelled from Medicine Valley. "Yes, unlike the others, he's a direct disciple like you. This lad is combative, so don't underestimate him," Guan replied, and with that he descended from the tree. Upon hearing this, Jiangshi and Shengtian tensed up again. Guan somewhat helplessly said, "Don't be nervous. Even if you lose, it's normal. My aim is just to enhance your practical experience." The two exchanged a glance, then forced a smile, clearly strained. Guan found it dull and shook his head, then turned and walked away, refusing their offer to follow. "Continue your cultivation. The tribulations of the world are increasing. Who knows, they might reach Mystic Valley one day, and then we'll need you two to guard Mystic Valley." Upon hearing Guan's words, the pair stopped in their tracks, their fighting spirit suddenly ignited. They didn't believe Mystic Valley could be in danger. Clearly, this was Guan's test for them. Guan made his way back to the Third Medicine Valley. As soon as he stepped from the transmission array platform, someone blocked his path. "I am Lu Changjing. I wish to have a word with the Valley Master if you may," said a middle-aged man standing before Guan, bowing respectfully. But before he could finish, Guan interrupted him. "Immortal Fall Gorge doesn't qualify." Guan walked past Lu Changjing, heading towards his loft. Immortal Fall Gorge was Lu Changjing's sect, a great sect on the seas. Guan knew of it through the causal threads he saw surrounding Lu Changjing. The strongest within Immortal Fall Gorge had attained the divine immortal of wondrous Dharma realm, which in Guan's eyes indeed did not qualify. Upon hearing Guan's words, Lu Changjing's face flushed. He turned around wanting to speak, but seeing Guan's retreating figure, he dared not show anger or figure out how to retain him. For Guan to speak directly of Immortal Fall Gorge indicated he truly did not regard it highly. Is he Sword Venerable Fudao himself, or a disciple of Sword Venerable Fudao? Lu Changjing frowned in thought. Being rejected was regrettable, but the thought that the other party might indeed be Sword Venerable Fudao filled him with excitement. The Sword Venerable Fudao was an existence comparable to the Yangxian Emperor. Lu Changjing took a deep breath and turned to visit the main city of sect of the Supreme Sect. As he turned around, a figure barred his way. He looked up and involuntarily furrowed his brows. This emperor has some connections with Immortal Fall Gorge. Take me there, the Yangxian Emperor said indifferently to Lu Changjing. Overwhelmed by the Yangxian Emperor's imposing aura, Lu Changjing cautiously asked, "May I inquire who Daoist friend is?" "Yangxian Emperor, have you ever heard of him?" "What?" Lu Changjing's face changed dramatically, a look of terror etched on his features. Passing disciples who heard the three words, Yangxian Emperor, instinctively turned their heads to look, as the Yangxian Emperor with a wave of his sleeve, disappeared into thin air along with Lu Changjing. Far away, Shen Xinzi, who was meditating under a tree, furrowed his brows, his eyes filled with a look of shock. That man was actually the lord of the Immortal Dynasty, the Yangxian Emperor. Over the past 100 years, he had played many games of chess with Yangxian Emperor, and always found him inscrutable. He hadn't realized his origin was so extraordinary. If even the Yangxian Emperor would come to spend a century in the Third Medicine Valley, what kind of legendary figures might appear in the future? Shen Xinzi turned his head towards where Guan stood, feeling that Guan's silhouette was so majestic as if he could bear the weight of the heavens collapsing. 30 years later, at the subsect of Supreme Sect, Yi Mansion, Guan and Yilan were enjoying tea in the courtyard. The fragrance of the tea pervaded the air, attracting several spirit birds to perch on the branches. It was a rare occasion without Zhenqin causing a nuisance. Guan and Yilan were both enjoying the moment. With one hand propping her chin, Yilan looked at Guan and asked with a smile, "Recently, Su Jie from your Third Medicine Valley has become quite famous. Even the news has reached our subsect, hasn't it?" "That kid's talent is indeed outstanding. He's really brought honor to the Third Medicine Valley," Guan responded with a smile. Su Jie had become a master disciple after only 5 years in the Third Medicine Valley. Guan did not give him personal guidance. He received the same treatment as the other disciples. This resulted in Su Jie not having a strong sense of belonging to the Third Medicine Valley, treating it merely as a stepping stone in his journey of cultivation. Su Jie was not particularly enthusiastic about Sword Venerable Fudao, and Guan even heard him privately telling other disciples that he would surpass Sword Venerable Fudao one day. Yilan chuckled. "More and more geniuses have emerged from the Third Medicine Valley over the years, and your disciples all show up under my command." Her eyes held admiration as she looked at Guan. Even setting aside the fact that Guan was a disciple of Sword Venerable Fudao, she had always respected his own capabilities. Ever since they were young, it seemed there was nothing that her senior brother couldn't do. "Then I'll have to trouble you to look out for them more," Guan replied with a smile and picked up a piece of pastry from the table, which was made by Yilan herself. Although the taste was not particularly delicious, the sentiment behind it meant the most. Yilan curiously asked, "Would you say Su Jie is your most outstanding disciple?" Su Jie, with his lifespan limit of 9,000 years and dazzling talent, was someone Yilan also wished to recruit. Guan shook his head and said, "How could that be? My most talented disciple is currently making a breakthrough." "Oh, breaking through to which realm?" "The Nirvana realm." "The Nirvana realm? Impossible. You're joking, right? Isn't this disciple much older than you?" "Not at all, he's 34 years younger than me. Someone over 800 years old breaking through to the Nirvana realm? I don't believe it. You're teasing me again," Yilan exclaimed with skepticism. She had never heard of anyone succeeding in reaching the Nirvana realm before 1,000 years of age. Guan laughed, offering no further explanation. He was talking about An Hao, who was undergoing tribulation with the help of immortal spirits from the Immortal Dynasty, and even the Yangxian Emperor himself was present to witness his tribulation. Boom! The sound of thunder rolled in from the skies. Yilan looked up to see dark clouds rushing in, carrying the potential to envelop the heavens. Yilan teasingly asked, "That wouldn't be the celestial phenomena triggered by the breakthrough of that disciple of yours, would it?" Guan also looked up and said, Of course not. However, this commotion is indeed caused by a breakthrough. The holy minister was making a breakthrough, advancing to the free immortal realm. Guan sensed it was going to be an interesting event. With the eruption of this phenomenon, many powerful existences quickly flew towards the holy court. The immortal dynasty, the Xianyu divine dynasty, and the sky demon great sect certainly wouldn't let the holy minister have a peaceful tribulation. After a quick calculation, Guan realized that the future held new variables. A free immortal could change the fate of the world. Yi Lan's eyes sparkled with curiosity upon hearing Guan's words. What kind of realm was capable of causing such a breakthrough phenomenon? It was at that moment that Guan saw a powerful aura coming from the depths of the cosmos. A meteorite wrapped in demonic chi was hurtling out of the silent destruction domain, bearing down on the great heavenly spirit land with unstoppable force. Such momentum suggested it had the cultivation level of the 9th layer of the free immortal realm. Guan hadn't been particularly concerned, for in recent years, there had been more than a handful of free immortals arriving in the great heavenly spirit land. But suddenly he felt a familiar presence. This aura was the Annihilation God Emperor. With memories of Long Zhan, Guan vividly remembered the aura of the Annihilation God Emperor. Indeed, this aura belonged to him, albeit not as powerful as what Long Zhan remembered. Chapter 428 Longqing's fear Holy Minister broke through. Annihilation God Emperor descended. Guan recalculated the momentum of great heavenly spirit land, and found that the future became blurred. Many things could not be thoroughly predicted. Most critically, Guan was unclear about the purpose of the Annihilation God Emperor's visit to the great heavenly spirit land. Long Zhan was from an era far distant from his own, with the battle court he established becoming ancient legend, making the Annihilation God Emperor only stronger than before. How could he not be wary? Even if this presence of the Annihilation God Emperor was just the aura of the free immortal, Guan believed that his true form would be an incredibly tricky existence. Under Guan's watch, the meteorite carrying the aura of the Annihilation God Emperor rapidly approached the great heavenly spirit land. The powerful beings within the great heavenly spirit land were also alarmed by the Annihilation God Emperor, all using divine thought and divine sense to probe, but no one dared to obstruct the Annihilation God Emperor. Within the holy land of the Holy Court, vast heavenly thunder covered tens of thousands of miles of sky. The holy minister amidst the tribulation looked up, his eyes revealing a wary expression. He knew his crossing of tribulation would bring trouble, but he had not expected such a powerful being to come. The aura of the Annihilation God Emperor reminded him of the primordial immortal king from before. He cursed the heavens for being unfair, but at this point, he could only grit his teeth and break through. Once the heavenly tribulation began, there was no turning back, either die or succeed in crossing. He leveraged the chi fortune of the holy court to break through. He could not afford to lose, because if he failed, the entire holy court would suffer greatly. Chi fortune connecting every living being of the court. Rings upon rings of grand formations guarded the holy minister, dazzling and emitting vast and infinite pressure, countering the heavenly might, stirring chaos in the heaven and earth rules, which also caused the surrounding mountains and oceans of the holy court to trigger cataclysms. Under the holy minister's gaze, a meteor streaked across the sky, the celestial thunder unable to obscure the meteor's brilliance. At this moment, not only the holy minister saw the meteor, great cultivators and demons from various powers across the land also saw it. Inside Yi Mansion, Yi Lan also saw the meteor crossing the horizon, and for some reason, she felt an unexplained palpitation. She couldn't help but look towards Guan and asked, "Did you see that meteor just now?" Guan nodded, said, "Did you make a wish?" Yi Lan gave him a glance, a worried expression across her brow, said, "At that moment just now, I was inexplicably scared." Could it be another demon from outer heaven descending? Guan chuckled and said, "What's there to fear? When has the supreme sect ever encountered such calamity? I've always felt quite at peace. The danger lies in the overseas realms." "That's not the right way to think. We can't always rely on others. The sword Venerable Fu Dao will leave eventually." Yi Lan shook her head. Guan offered comfort, said, I am the sword Venerable Fudao, don't worry. She laughed upon hearing this, said, Really? Then can Senior teach me divine skills? It's not impossible, say something nice. Want to hear something nice? Yilan gave Guan a flirtatious smile, then stood up and walked towards him. Guan hurriedly raised his hand and said, I was joking. Humph, I took it seriously. Boom! The meteor, enshrouded in blazing flames, shattered the sea of clouds, crashing down upon the mountains with terrifying momentum, instantly crushing miles of mountains and forests. Bright light bursting forth, rolling dust rose into the air, like a massive wall of dust pushing towards the distance, destroying everything in its path. The earth shook and trembled, as if it were the apocalypse. As this force spread to the horizon, terrifying waves of flame emerged at the center of the explosion, seeming to burst through the sky. This power from beyond wreaked havoc on all upon the land, merciless and brutally cruel. After an unknown period, the roaring between heaven and earth ceased, but the rolling dust continued to churn, just without its former intensity. A figure stepped out from the dust, clad in a black robe overlaid with black scale armor shimmering with a cold light. He wore a fierce helmet with two horn-like blades pointing to the sky. Below the helmet there was no face, only pitch blackness, akin to a lifeless black hole. With each step, the gravel beneath his feet turned to dust. The surface revealed magma patterns, terribly fearsome. He stopped walking, looked up, still pitch black under the helmet. Without eyes, it was unclear what he was looking at, or perhaps what he was sensing. He shifted his left foot to the side, instantly dispersing the dust between heaven and earth, revealing the wounded land, shocking to behold. He stood within a massive crater, over 100 miles wide. Outside the crater, the land was littered with rocks and crevices, barren and desolate. Not just the dust on the land. Even the sky suddenly cleared. The Annihilation God Emperor turned his head towards the distance. After looking for several moments, he turned and walked away. With one step, his figure shifted millions of miles. The land was boundlessly vast. He took 5 continuous steps and still had not reached the edge of the continent. He arrived at a cliff, where the area was still trembling. Following his gaze downward, a city below the cliff was collapsing, and the mortals were wailing and crying, their misery extreme. The Annihilation God Emperor remained silent for a while, then suddenly waved his sleeve, and the earth regained its calm. Pieces of rubble and wooden pillars rose and flew toward the distance. After doing all this, he disappeared on the cliff. The cries beneath the cliff abruptly ceased, and the whole world fell into silence. In the evening, Guan entered the Third Medicine Valley, watching the Annihilation God Emperor travel the other side of the world, temporarily unable to discern his purpose. The Annihilation God Emperor did not head toward the Holy Court, indicating that he was not attracted by the Holy Minister's tribulation. He seemed more like he was searching for something. Perhaps it was no coincidence, fearing the Holy Minister's tribulation might affect what he was seeking. As soon as Guan entered the valley, Longqing hurried over, his face eager to please, expressing concern and warmth. Get lost. If you can't comprehend, it means the time isn't right, and your mindset is still not stable. Guan glared at Longqing and said thus. Within the Supreme Sect, many believed Guan was a disciple of Sword Venerable Fudao, but many disciples within the Third Medicine Valley, including Longqing, thought Guan was Sword Venerable Fudao himself. This was also confirmed by Shen Xinzi, who now showed extreme respect for Guan, entirely in the manner of a junior. How long must I wait? Why do I have to wait? Longqing asked indignantly. Guan suddenly thought of something. Could it be that the Annihilation God Emperor was here for Longqing? It was very likely. Guan said sternly, You already know your physique is special. Can't you guess that you might be carrying a significant cause and effect? If you don't settle down, you'll face great trouble, and even I won't be able to protect you, possibly not even the whole world. His tone was severe, causing Longqing to be stunned. As Longqing reflected on Guan's words, he couldn't help feeling uneasy and panicked. Guan was influencing his emotions with his Taoist intent. He had to scare the young man. Without absolute certainty, Guan dared not let Longqing reveal his true identity. The cause and effect of the Dragon Clan were too significant, likely to draw the real body of the Annihilation God Emperor, and the current battle court. Longqing's expression shifted uncertainly, but Guan did not continue to frighten him, and instead walked past him. Just a few steps away, an Xian arrived, reporting that some disciples were fighting and needed his intervention. Hearing the names of the fighters, Guan understood why an Xian had to seek him out. Two geniuses. Ranked among the top in talent within the valley, they had not yet completed their training, but already great cultivators and notable families were trying to recruit them. It's typical of geniuses, they tend to be arrogant, and when arrogant individuals meet, conflicts are inevitable. Guan followed an Xian, not feeling troubled, his thoughts still on the annihilation god emperor. The setting sun was like blood, but it didn't add a touch of tragedy over Third Medicine Valley. It was still full of vitality. The holy minister's tribulation eventually led to a great battle, with the Immortal Dynasty, Xianyu Divine Dynasty, Sky Demon Great Sect, and a few forces bearing grudges against the Holy Court all attacking together. The battle was spectacular, prompting even Guan to watch. Despite the perilous process and countless casualties, the Holy Court survived the ordeal, and in the end, the Holy Minister made a breakthrough and even fought a great battle with Yangxian Emperor. Although the Holy Minister was a civilian official, his combat strength was formidable, able to hold his ground against the Yangxian Emperor, which surprised Guan. The Yangxian Emperor did not entangle further, otherwise his alliance with the Xianyu Divine Dynasty and the Sky Demon Great Sect's Free Immortal might have been able to eliminate the Holy Minister. This battle passed, but it also laid down a greater cause of trouble for the future. Thus, Great Heavenly Spirit Land welcomed a brief period of peace. 8 years quickly passed. One day Guan, accompanied by an Xian and Blood Prison Great Saint, arrived at Tianya Valley. Xian had unexpectedly returned, specifically to seek out Guan. Before meeting with Xian, Guan collected medicinal herbs first. Xian took him into his cave and, after activating the cave's restrictions, asked nervously, "Are you Sword Venerable Fu Dao?" Chapter 429 Heavenly Dao has its own fixed number. Facing Xian's inquiry, Guan raised an eyebrow and said, "So the news has reached your ears?" Xian crossed his arms in front of his chest, chuckling proudly. "Of course. That's really slow." "What?" Xian's smile froze, uncertain of what to say. If it were anyone else, he would have responded with a kick, but facing Guan, what could he do? Endure, that's what. Guan found his expression amusing, so he pretended to be mysterious and said, "That's right, I am Sword Venerable Fu Dao. However, many people don't believe it, and think that I am just a disciple of Sword Venerable Fu Dao. You must keep this matter between us. Heaven knows, earth knows, you know, and I know." Upon hearing this, Xian became excited. His body trembled as he asked carefully, "Is it true? Why, let me know." Guan's gaze deepened as he said, "Even though you are no match for me in my eyes, you are the only one who poses a threat to my talent. And Hao doesn't have what it takes. He's too compliant and will stumble eventually. Only those prodigies who survive can be considered strong." Xian was deeply moved, his fists clenched and blood boiling with excitement. Guan was satisfied with his reaction. Winning people over with just a few words. Why not? Then, Guan went and sat down at a stone table to the side. Xian snapped back to reality and hurried to follow. Sitting across from Guan, Xian asked nervously, "Is it your talent, or are you the reincarnation of a great power, or have you concealed your age?" Guan looked at him and replied, "When you reach the Immortal Path realm, you'll understand a stage called Reincarnation Tribulation." Reincarnation Tribulation? Xian was captivated just by the name. Guan asked, "You didn't come to find me just to confirm this, did you?" He could guess Xian's purpose, but he preferred to hear Xian say it himself. Xian took a deep breath and said, "The Xianyu Divine Dynasty has invited me to join. Lately, I've been thinking about breaking away from His Majesty. What's your view on the Xianyu Divine Dynasty?" Guan knew about the rift between Xian and Li Xiandao. As Li Xiandao was becoming stronger, he began to reveal his true nature, like Guan, and became increasingly domineering, which added to the pressure on those around him. Guan replied, If you want it as a stepping stone, then it indeed is a good place. But if you plan to stay with the Xianyu divine dynasty, they will all go up in smoke. LV Xian's eyes widened as he asked, the Xianyu divine dynasty will be destroyed? Guan chuckled. To be more precise, all the powers of this world will go up in smoke, the old forces will turn to dust. Including the supreme sect, Taizong dynasty? Yes. Why? Because the world has its cycles, and the heavenly Tao has its set parameters. Doesn't that mean all my efforts are meaningless? LV Xian turned pale, completely disheartened. Guan shook his head, his words laden with profound meaning. Someone always survives. But think about it. If all the powers of the world disappear and 99% of beings turn to dust, and you survive, then after weathering that period, what will your status be in this world? Excitement shone on LV Xian's face as he thought more about it. He was so elated at the idea of being one of the supreme beings of the world, that he even ignored how he would survive to that point. His gaze towards Guan changed, filled with admiration. What level of cultivation was needed to foresee such an outcome? He didn't doubt Guan's words because he had also heard legends about the evolution of the world. Many cataclysms had swept through the world since ancient times. From what he could see, the world was far from destruction. At least, there were no signs in sight. Indeed, Sword Venerable Fudao was the most formidable. Even the Yangxian Emperor couldn't compare. LV Xian became exhilarated and started pressing for more information. Guan did not reveal more about the fortune of heaven and earth, but regarding some trivial information that he could disclose, he considered it taking care of LV Baishan's son. Half an ancient hour later, Guan, accompanied by LV Xian, walked out of the cave. Luo Hun watched LV Xian's respectful demeanor and couldn't help but laugh. This LV Xian was so proud by nature that even the emperor had never been shown such reverence. It was unknown what abilities this young Guan possessed to make a proud figure like LV Xian submit. Luo Hun watched from a distance, then approached them. Guan, where is the book? Asked Luo Hun as he reached Guan. Guan casually took out Dream of the Red Chamber and handed it to him, saying, Green Hero Travel will be after a while. The author went out to make a breakthrough. Luo Hun's old face turned red as he said, What Green Hero Travel? I just like Dream of the Red Chamber. LV Xian asked curiously, What is Green Hero Travel? Dream of the Red Chamber. He knew of it because being interested in Guan, he had read all of Guan's writings. An Xian walked over and, hearing their conversation, couldn't help but look at Luo Hun with an odd expression, causing Luo Hun extreme embarrassment, wishing he could find a crack in the ground to hide in. After Guan left Tianya Valley with an Xian and Blood Prison Great Saint, an Xian began disparaging Luo Hun, saying she hadn't expected the esteemed Luo Hun to read such vulgar books. Guan looked ahead, filled with dissatisfaction. Stinking girl, daring to scold indirectly. He'd have to make her suffer a bit when guiding her cultivation later. In the wilderness, a gentle breeze blew. And Hao, dressed like a wandering swordsman, strolled along a mountain path with his hands raised, his sword scabbard resting on his shoulders through the crook of his arm, his head tilted back, looking carefree. After attaining the Nirvana realm, he had completely shed his youthful naivety, and now exuded an inscrutable aura, embodying the elegance of a high-level practitioner. A gust of wind blew towards him from up front, rustling in Hao's hair. His half-closed eyes suddenly opened wide. He looked towards the top of the hill in front of him, where a towering figure stood, its black robe fluttering in the wind. Annihilation God Emperor. And Hao found that he couldn't see the stranger's true face, which meant that the stranger either possessed an extremely high cultivation level, or had some kind of treasure on him. He believed the former was more likely. And Hao, who had traveled far and wide for many years, had encountered many powerful beings, yet none were as mysterious and formidable as the person before him. He was not afraid and continued walking forward. The Annihilation God Emperor stood still on the hilltop. As Hao passed by him, the God Emperor suddenly said, Your life grid is extraordinary. You are destined not to belong to this world. And Hao stopped in his tracks, didn't turn his head, and instead gazed at the distant rugged mountains, asking, Oh, to which world do I belong then? To a higher realm, Once you transcend the 9 heavens of the immortal path, you'll be able to go there. Is that so? May I ask if your excellency comes from that realm? And Hao did not sound surprised, his tone as calm as ever. The Annihilation God Emperor turned around. And Hao turned to face him, only 5 steps apart. Looking under the God Emperor's helmet at the pitch darkness, and Hao felt wary but not intimidated. Even before Nirvana, and Hao often faced beings far surpassing his own realm. No matter where he was, he had never been afraid. He had long regarded life and death indifferently. Suddenly, a purple vortex appeared under the Annihilation God Emperor's helmet, and Hao unconsciously looked at it, his gaze changing and losing its brightness. Chapter 430. The Strongest Loneliness. And Hao had a dream in which he found himself seated upon an immensely grand chair, with a Qilin crawling at his feet and true dragons swirling around his hands. Below him was a radiant starry sky, and figures exuding powerful auras floated beneath him like a series of steps. The sensation was incredibly wonderful. He felt as if he had control over everything and even experienced a sense of loneliness. Immersed in this feeling, he lost track of time. He did not know how much time had passed when suddenly, a dazzling golden light burst from the depth of the universe below and rushed towards him, turning the powerful figures along its path into ash. The golden light shone on Hao's face, making it feel scorching hot to the point of burning. And Hao suddenly opened his eyes, gasping for breath with sweat covering his forehead and his pupils still trembling. What met his gaze was the twilight sky, and his eyes instinctively caught the sight of the figure of the Annihilation God Emperor. The Annihilation God Emperor stood nearby, gazing up at the sky, seemingly lost in thought. And Hao sat up and was about to stand when the Annihilation God Emperor's finger pressed on his forehead, rendering him immobile. At that moment, and Hao felt his mana and chi blood freeze, making him extremely uncomfortable. Having reached the Nirvana realm, he had felt so powerful, confident to handle anything. But at that moment he felt as if he had returned to the mortal realm, feeling his own insignificance once again. He looked up at the Annihilation God Emperor, his expression of shock rapidly turning into one of resentment. You have the same look in your eyes as he did, possessing the same life grid, but you are still far from his level, the Annihilation God Emperor said, looking down at Hao. And Hao gritted his teeth and asked, "Who is he? His name cannot be mentioned. This entire great heaven and earth cannot bear its consequences. If mentioned, this great heaven and earth would instantaneously turn into nothingness." And Hao's eyes widened. It was the first time he heard of such power. Neither the Yangxian Emperor nor Holy Heaven could achieve such feats. Having traversed so many great heaven and earths, it is rare to encounter someone with such a grand life grid as yours. I grant you a divine skill. Now it remains to be seen how high you can reach. As he spoke, the Annihilation God Emperor's index finger emitted demonic chi, which burrowed into Hao's forehead. And Hao, unable to move, was extremely nervous. As the demonic chi entered his body, he did not feel any discomfort, which made him even more uneasy. The Annihilation God Emperor withdrew his hand and said, "What you saw earlier were the memories of that being. Remember that sensation. It is the power you must strive with all your might to pursue." With those words, the Annihilation God Emperor vanished from the spot. And Hao, then freed from constraint, swiftly got up. He could no longer sense the presence of the Annihilation God Emperor. Not a trace was left, as if everything he had experienced was just an illusion. Who exactly is he? And Hao furrowed his brows, touching his forehead subconsciously, feeling that he had gotten himself into big trouble. Meanwhile, far away in the Third Medicine Valley, Guan withdrew his gaze. When the Annihilation God Emperor approached Hao, he had been paying attention. This Annihilation God Emperor was merely a free immortal in terms of cultivation level. If he dared to harm Hao, Guan could eradicate him even faster, but it seemed as though the Annihilation God Emperor intended to bring an opportunity to Hao. After the Annihilation God Emperor left, Guan checked Hao's fate once more, and found that his future had changed. Hao was already on the path of the chosen, but after receiving the legacy from the Annihilation God Emperor, Hao grew even stronger, which reminded Guan of Long Zhan and Lu Han, who could just barely surpass him. What exactly is the origin of the Annihilation God Emperor? What does a higher realm refer to? Guan looked up, and beyond the outer heaven was the universe, surrounded by the silent destruction domain. The entire universe seemed infinitely vast, with no end to be seen in any direction. His gaze involuntarily fell upon the boundary gate, guarded by the heavenly spirit god. Perhaps to reach beyond the universe, one must pass through that gate. But approaching the boundary gate would mean destruction by the heavenly spirit god, a terrifying existence capable of effortlessly annihilating the Taoist hidden immortal. Guan then thought of the immortals he had encountered. It seemed that there were even more terrifying and vast beings above the immortal path. Master, the sect leader is here to see you. A disciple ran up to Guan and whispered. Guan, standing in front of a wooden railing, withdrew his gaze and nodded to the disciple, then walked towards his loft. Returning to the room, Guan saw LV Batian, who immediately rose to greet him. I've told you so many times, there's no need for such formality, it feels so alienating, Guan complained. As LV Batian watched him walk over and sit down, he finally spoke. I was ignorant before. Knowing your true identity now, proper courtesy must be observed. Guan's face remained unchanged, but he was pleased inside. Old LV really understood people's hearts. He invited LV Batian to sit, and asked why he had come. Your disciple, Sujia, had a conflict with a family. It was a misunderstanding, and I have had the family release him, and have tried hard to ease the relationship. However, Sujia is still unhappy, LV Batian began, his face showing helplessness as he spoke. Due to the prior incident with the Wu Ju, LV Batian dared not be careless. With such extraordinary talent, Sujia likely had Guan's guidance behind him. He had to handle the situation carefully. Guan replied nonchalantly, if he's unhappy, so be it. The supreme sect must not indulge him. LV Batian pondered the underlying meaning of Guan's words and responded, he's still young after all, and his talent is indeed rare. He reminds me of an Hao in his earlier years. Mentioning an Hao made him think of an Xian, and his expression turned strange. When many things were connected, they seemed so absurd. He also wondered what an Hao's feelings would be if he knew all this. And Hao didn't know who his own master was, only knowing that his master had transformed into Sword Venerable Fudao. Are there a shortage of geniuses in this world now? Just treat him normally, no need to consider me. He is just a passerby from the Third Medicine Valley and has not truly become my disciple, Guan said carelessly. Hearing this, LV Batian became even more interested in Sujia. Without the guidance of Sword Venerable Fudao, Sujia had still shown such talent. Such a genius must be properly cultivated. The key was to bring him under his command, to become his strength. Seeing Guan truly uninterested in Sujia, LV Batian started discussing other matters, hoping Guan would provide guidance for the future development of the Supreme Sect. A full ancient hour passed before LV Batian finally left. Guan personally saw him down the stairs. Before parting, the two kept bowing to each other, causing nearby disciples to talk. Guan looked at LV Batian's departing figure, and noticed that LV Batian's karma had changed. Killer calamity. He immediately calculated LV Batian's life grid, and his expression became strange. Due to his words today, LV Batian would face calamity. LV Batian would find death due to Sujia. Chapter 431. Involuntarily in Guan's projections, LV Batian would focus on nurturing Sujia in the future, treating him as the next sect leader to be groomed, and even betrothed the daughter of the LV family's patriarch to Sujia, as if she were his own child. Sujia did not disappoint LV Batian. His growth rate was not inferior to an Hao's, and he too took an Hao as his target. 500 years later, when an Hao returned, Sujia, overrating his own ability, challenged an Hao. Even though an Hao suppressed his cultivation level, he still easily defeated Sujia. After that, Sujia's personality drastically changed, becoming paranoid. He practiced cultivation even more diligently, treating getting stronger as the most important thing. He even schemed for LV Batian's defying fate divine skill, and eventually succeeded in persuading LV Batian to pass on the skill to him. After the transmission of the skill, LV Batian became a cripple and returned to the LV family, only to have the LV family attacked by Su Jie's enemies. In that chaos, LV Batian died. Although Guan could see the future, he was not panicked, because he knew these events would occur only if he did not intervene. To deduce cause and effect, one must set oneself aside, an approach that allows for more accurate foresight. This is why many who are aware of their heavenly destiny refuse to engage in worldly affairs, because they cannot predict the choices they would make in the future, and thus they try not to change the course of the world. Guan was not displeased with Su Jie because of this. He was more reflective on both of their fates. LV Batian's choice to choose Su Jie brought disaster upon himself, and it wasn't that Su Jie intended to harm him. It could only be said that fate was playing tricks on people. One thought can turn one into a demon or make one an immortal. But who really knows whether their own thought is right or wrong? Guan muttered to himself, truly moved. Downstairs, the blood prison great saint looked up, pondering the words of his master. Could it be that LV Batian was about to become a demon? That would be just great. The blood prison great saint had no fondness for LV Batian at all. Knowing that LV Batian might be in trouble, he only felt schadenfreude, even looking forward to LV Batian disappointing Guan. After watching for a while, Guan turned and walked back inside the house. Night fell, and the lights of the third medicine valley lit up one after another, revealing the mortal world's charms. 20 years later, in the third medicine valley, the sunlight was bright, birds circled above, and the shapes of disciples practicing cultivation could be seen everywhere, with supreme sect disciples riding demon birds flying across the sky. Guan lay underneath the mystic pure tree with his hands behind his head, looking at his attribute panel. Guan pondered for a moment and said seriously, "Not bad, you can challenge Qing'an now." Upon hearing this, the white spirit rat was overjoyed and immediately bade farewell to Guan. It was off to challenge Longqing. After sending off the white spirit rat, Guan continued to lie down, enjoying his leisure time. Doing nothing but lying there was quite interesting too. However, this peaceful life was about to be shattered. The Annihilation God Emperor, who had been traveling the mortal world, had already arrived at the Supreme Sect. Judging by his pace, it would only be a matter of time before he entered the third medicine valley. Wherever the Annihilation God Emperor went among crowds, he would disguise himself as a cultivator, and so he did at the Supreme Sect. With 1,000 faces for 1,000 people, no one could remember the visage he had transformed into. Time continued to pass. An ancient hour later, a figure entered the third medicine valley. A man in blue clothes with an ordinary face and no eye-catching magic artifacts adorning him. It was the Annihilation God Emperor. As he stepped into the third medicine valley, he looked around, as if in search of something. A disciple approached to greet him, and inquired about his business. The Medicine Valley disciple was very polite, and did not posture. The Annihilation God Emperor said, "I'm looking for Ji Xiaoyu." Ji Xiaoyu? The Medicine Valley disciple paused, thought for a while, and then remembered, saying, "Elder Ji has been in seclusion for many years and has not seen anyone. I have been here at Medicine Valley for many years without having seen her. It's fine, I'll just look around. Your Medicine Valley allows that, right? Of course, you're free to do as you wish. If you have any needs, feel free to ask me. I'm much appreciated." The Annihilation God Emperor responded, and the Medicine Valley disciple followed up with a bow before leaving. Afterwards, the Annihilation God Emperor continued forward. When he passed by the dojo, he turned his head to look, but after a mere glance he withdrew his gaze and did not pause in his footsteps. 2 female disciples walked towards him, one of whom was Yu Yingying. "I told you before that the heavenly colored evergreen grass needs constant attention. You didn't listen. Do you know how many top-grade spirit stones are lost with one plant?" Yu Yingying complained, while the woman beside her was almost crying, her lips quivering. As the Annihilation God Emperor was about to pass by Yu Yingying, he suddenly said, "For one facing imminent death, you've managed to live quite tenaciously." Upon hearing this, Yu Yingying stopped in her tracks, looking suspiciously at the Annihilation God Emperor. She knew that she was a reincarnation of a heavenly demon, and with Gu An's help over the years, her cultivation level had been continuously growing. Although not a genius, at least she was far from her lifespan's limit. Hearing the words of the Annihilation God Emperor, Yu Yingying instinctively panicked. "Are you talking to me?" Yu Yingying stared at the Annihilation God Emperor and asked. The Annihilation God Emperor did not stop, continuing on his way, leaving behind a perplexing comment for Yu Yingying. "Cherish the present. There will come a time when you are powerless to control your fate." A time when she is powerless to control her fate? Yu Yingying furrowed her brows, immediately feeling uneasy. The Annihilation God Emperor eventually reached Gu An's pavilion, where the Blood Prison Great Saint looked up at him, his eyes filled with curiosity. "Reincarnation Path Emperor, aren't you going to show yourself?" The Annihilation God Emperor spoke, saying words that Shenxinzi, who was eavesdropping from afar, could not hear. After hearing what the Annihilation God Emperor had said to Yu Yingying, Shenxinzi became curious and puzzled about him. But unfortunately, the Annihilation God Emperor did not allow his eavesdropping to continue. "Reincarnation Path Emperor?" The Blood Prison Great Saint promptly stood up, watching the Annihilation God Emperor warily. The Annihilation God Emperor glanced at him and said, "Future Great Saint, sit down. Pretend you saw nothing, heard nothing. My future identity has been seen through by him? He is a real master. How extraordinary!" Blood Prison Great Saint's heart raced with excitement as he began to fantasize about his own future greatness. He was not afraid of the Annihilation God Emperor Chaos. Chapter 432. 10 million incarnations. While the Blood Prison Great Saint was still lost in his vivid fantasies, Ji Xiaoyu's room door opened. Dressed in black, Ji Xiaoyu stepped out of the house, her gaze settling on the Annihilation God Emperor, filled with doubt. The Annihilation God Emperor's gaze rested on Ji Xiaoyu, his expression remaining calm. At this moment, the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor appeared beside Ji Xiaoyu, vigilantly staring at the Annihilation God Emperor. "Who might you be?" the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor asked in a deep voice, his eyes betraying a strong sense of wariness. He, strong as a divine thought, true immortal, couldn't see through the Annihilation God Emperor's cultivation level at all, which gave him the same feeling he got when facing Guan. The Annihilation God Emperor spoke up. "Reincarnation Path Emperor, you should remember me." He completely ignored the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor, feeling like the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor wasn't worthy of conversation. Upon hearing this, Ji Xiaoyu's face changed dramatically, her expression one of disbelief, her body trembling as she struggled to compose herself. Seeing her like this made the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor even more nervous, while the Blood Prison Great Saint curiously looked at Ji Xiaoyu, seeing her in such a state for the first time. Taking a deep breath, Ji Xiaoyu raised her hand in salute and said, "The Junior has seen the Divine Emperor. May I ask why the Divine Emperor has personally come to the great heaven and earth?" The Divine Emperor? The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor appeared to realize something, his look towards the Annihilation God Emperor filled with reverence. He stepped back, half kneeling, bowing his proud head. The Blood Prison Great Saint was even more curious about the identity of the Annihilation God Emperor, his blood beginning to boil. The stronger the Annihilation God Emperor, the more likely his words would come true. He might yet become a great saint of the great heavenly spirit land. The Annihilation God Emperor said, "I am here to find someone, a remnant of the ancient evil demons." "Ancient evil demons?" Ji Xiaoyu asked in surprise. "Descendant from the long family of the battle court." The answer from the Annihilation God Emperor made Ji Xiaoyu's pupils widen sharply. Ji Xiaoyu asked with a frown, "That clan still has descendants? Weren't they already extinct?" The Annihilation God Emperor stared at her and queried, "Do you really not know?" Ji Xiaoyu fell silent. The Annihilation God Emperor continued, "I am aware your master is from the Dragon clan, but you must have seen their malice. Should a living person carry such hatred, the catastrophe he could cause is beyond what you or I could foresee." That would not be a catastrophe for one great heaven and earth, but a crisis for the entire universe. Ji Xiaoyu replied, I really don't know, and currently I am undergoing the reincarnation tribulation. I have memories, but not the genuine feelings of my true self. The Annihilation God Emperor turned around, his gaze sweeping over the third medicine valley. Ji Xiaoyu followed his gaze, her heart suddenly trembling as she realized his gaze had fallen on Guan. Guan lay beneath the mystic pure tree, his eyes covered by leaves, as if he were sleeping. The Annihilation God Emperor looked at Guan, pausing for a while before shifting his gaze elsewhere. Ji Xiaoyu didn't dare disturb him, waiting for him to speak. If she felt this way, the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor was no different. After a long time, the Annihilation God Emperor turned his head towards Ji Xiaoyu and said, Indeed, his aura and causality are nowhere in this land, but I will draw him out. Once you conclude this lifetime, you may come to assist me, and I will not leave you unrewarded. Having said this, the Annihilation God Emperor transformed into his true form, his black robe fluttering, his scale armor glinting with a chilly light, and the darkness beneath his helmet startled the blood prison great saint enough to widen his eyes. The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor glanced over subconsciously, equally intimidated by the Annihilation God Emperor's appearance. The Annihilation God Emperor vanished into thin air. Far away, Shinxinzi, though unable to hear their conversation, saw the true figure of the Annihilation God Emperor and was startled, rising involuntarily. Not just him. Some curious disciples also witnessed the transformation of the Annihilation God Emperor. However, the sudden disappearance of the Annihilation God Emperor gave them the illusion that they were seeing things. The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor stood up, took a step forward, and asked in a low voice, Could it be that one from the legends of the Silent Destruction Domain? Ji Xiaoyu looked up towards the sky and softly said, Yes, that's the one. The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor appeared to be in a trance, and he couldn't help but ask, Wasn't that just a legend? It actually exists. Your Majesty, what is your relationship with him? Ji Xiaoyu replied, I have once received the inheritance he left behind and communicated with his divine thoughts. He could be considered one of my mentors, and this was also the first time I truly saw him. The one just now must have been only an avatar. Avatar? The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor exclaimed. Yes, an avatar. He has countless avatars spread across different worlds, all searching for his own way. Ji Xiaoyu's gaze became distant, as if filled with longing. The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor fell silent, equally shaken. The Blood Prison Great Saint, on the other hand, contemptuously thought to himself, Why doesn't such a powerful being dare to take a walk in front of the Master? In his view, the Annihilation God Emperor was wary of Guan. Time continued to pass. As dusk approached, Guan sat up. He stretched lazily, having had a very comfortable sleep. He even had a dream, as if he had experienced lifespan samsara. But it was not as real as the memories left by lifespan samsara. This made Guan want to start another round of lifespan samsara. He stood up and walked towards the attic, spotting the white spirit rat on the way, which was looking at him with a plaintive gaze. Guan noticed that one of its legs was twitching, clearly injured. It had been at a disadvantage at Longqing's place. Fortunately, the breakthrough deepened their path of returning primordial spirit. Guan said with a smile, a smug look on his face. Being cautious was always right. When he arrived at the front of his attic, Ji Xiaoyu walked out from inside. Let's go up to talk. Ji Xiaoyu came up to Guan and suggested in a low voice. After that, she went up the stairs first, with Guan following behind. Once upstairs and in the room, Ji Xiaoyu began to cast spells, setting up restrictions around the room to prevent others from spying, even utilizing the power of the primordial Taoist talisman. Is it that serious? Guan feigned surprise. Ji Xiaoyu fixed her gaze on Guan, her eyes complex. Guan touched his face and asked, What's the matter? Have you awakened memories of your past life? Or rather, have you not gone through reincarnation tribulation at all? Who exactly are you? Ji Xiaoyu asked softly. Guan laughed and inquired, Who do you think I am? Ji Xiaoyu looked at him and said, You take in orphans and give them the Long surname. Could it be that your real surname is Long? Suspecting him Longqing? Guan couldn't help but smile wryly. Wrong guess, I'm actually the ancestor of the dragon clan. Guan shook his head and said, How could that be? My surname is Gu. Giving Longqing the long surname is because he has it on his back. You've known that all along, haven't you? Ji Xiaoyu responded. I have known for a long time, but I've also always had my suspicions. It's okay if you don't admit it, and it's best if you never do because there are beings out there to kill you that have come here. That being is from the ancient legends of the Silent Destruction Domain, and may have existed even longer than the Great Heavenly Spirit Land. He is convinced that you are hiding in the Great Heavenly Spirit Land, and he will not rest until he finds you. Guan, resigned, said, I'm truly not the person you think I am, but I am quite curious about this being you mentioned. Is he very strong? Chapter 433. Chivalrous Reincarnation. Yang Xian. He is naturally very strong, perhaps the most powerful being I remember, and I don't even know how high his Tao level is, but one thing is certain. If he discovers your true identity, or if you offend him, you won't stand a chance. Ji Xiaoyu looked at Guan and spoke seriously, her tone somewhat cold. Guan didn't get angry but was surprised as he asked, That impressive? Do you admire him? Ji Xiaoyu frowned and said, How could that be possible? I am just worried about your safety. He will take action next, and you must practice restraint. Avoid revealing yourself, and try not to make a move if possible. What kind of move could I make? I'm just an ordinary farming cultivator, said Guan with a shrug. The more he acted like this, the more vexed Ji Xiaoyu became, thinking him too arrogant. Seeing her about to erupt, Guan continued, Don't worry, I know what I'm doing and am really not who you think I am. Ji Xiaoyu calmed her emotions and said, It's good as long as you understand. After that, she released the power of the primordial Taoist talisman, and walked past Guan. Guan turned to look at her and asked, Are you leaving just like that? Yes, I need to continue my cultivation, Ji Xiaoyu said without turning back. Guan didn't try to persuade her further, feeling helpless inside. I really am not a descendant of the dragon clan. As for the Annihilation God Emperor, he did indeed feel wary, but not towards this Annihilation God Emperor. It was the original one he was cautious of. Guan sat in his own chair, and took out a leisure book to distract himself. Regardless, it was a good thing that the Annihilation God Emperor hadn't recognized him as Longqing, nor had he seen through Longqing's real identity. It proved that Guan still had time to grow. In this life, he wasn't going to be as reckless as Long Zhan. A year later, the 900-year-old in Xian came to the Hidden Spirit Palace where first he gathered medicinal herbs, with the deep-sea dragon carp following closely behind, carrying the basket for him. This herb, my junior sister should like it. This one for Jiang Qiong, it hasn't been easy for her. These are for Tian Yaoer, she has a big appetite. Guan mumbled to himself while picking the herbs. The deep-sea dragon carp had grown accustomed to this. He didn't speak. With his long hair reaching his feet, wearing white clothes and an elegant demeanor, like a gentle woman. His eyes seemed to hold tenderness, a face full of feminine charm, making it difficult to guess that he was a male demon. When Guan finished gathering, he took the basket and handed a bag of seeds to the deep-sea dragon carp. As the deep-sea dragon carp began to plant the seeds, Guan walked to the entrance of the Hidden Spirit Palace and sat on his rocking chair, taking out a book. Why is there another person trying to tell fortunes? Guan could hardly bear to let the other party suffer a loss, so he chose no. You refuse to let the other party tell your fortune. The person feels somewhat disappointed and bids you farewell. At the age of 15, you condensed a golden core with sword intent within, becoming an unmatched prodigy the purple micro-immortal mansion hadn't encountered in 10,000 years. At the age of 17, you were sent by the purple micro-immortal mansion to the 10,000 sword immortal ridge. On the way, you encountered someone being attacked by a demon cultivator, whose wife and children had already been slain. You felt compassionate, but the elder accompanying you advised you not to interfere too much. Will you choose to intervene and save them? Here it comes. Time to kick off the immortal chivalrous life. Save them. Ignoring the elder's advice, you forcefully step in. The attackers are relentless and even start to besiege you. Out of desperation, you execute your swordsmanship, slaying the demon cultivator leader, and accidentally seize 87 years of lifespan, marking a turning point in your destiny. Here it comes. Guan had been wondering why there had been no prompt about seizing lifespan. It turns out this kid had never taken a life. Only at the age of 17 did he discover the ability to seize lifespan, indicating he truly had a heart of great kindness. Guan also grew curious. Could it be that before starting the lifespan samsara, what he had in mind could determine the nature within the reincarnation? That's quite possible. In his previous reincarnation evolution, he had thought about surviving as much as possible, so his character in the reincarnation was more paranoid. At the age of 18, you arrive at the 10,000 Sword Immortal Ridge, where you stand out among the thousands of trialists, and you obtain your first immortal sword in this life, Jinghong. At the age of 19, after contemplating the sword intent of 10,000 Sword Immortal Ridge, you gain the appreciation of the ancestor of 10,000 Sword Immortal Dao, who wishes to take you as his disciple. Will you choose to agree? Definitely agree. What's there to hesitate about? Start getting stronger. Guan thought this and made his decision immediately. You choose to be apprenticed to the ancestor of 10,000 Sword Immortal Dao. You receive his instruction, and you begin to delve into the 10,000 Sword Immortal Dao. At 21, you finally step into the 10,000 Sword Immortal Dao. All of the swords in the 10,000 Sword Immortal Ridge tremble for you. The ancestor is very satisfied with you and starts to personally train you in swordsmanship. Wait a minute. Chapter 434 Sword Dao Life. Although it was impossible to determine Yang Xian's realm from the hints, he seemed very strong. Most importantly, he was only 21 years old. Guan contemplated as he read the information. He even felt that the Dahong realm was stronger than the usual great heaven and earth, casually decorated with the word immortal. At 25, your master, the founder of the 1,000 Swords Immortal, summoned you alone. The message read. When you went to see him, he claimed he wanted to pass on the position of head of the 1,000 Swords Immortal Peaks to you. If you accept the chi fortune of the 1,000 Swords Immortal Peaks, you will be able to command all the immortal swords, divine swords, and treasure swords there, and even gain longevity, but the price is the loss of your freedom. Do you choose to accept the position? Lose my freedom? No way. No. Guan immediately refused. In this life, he intended to experience the life of a chivalrous hero, not to pursue longevity. And what about the reincarnation Bodhi's original self, if it obtained longevity? You refuse the position of head of the 1,000 Swords Immortal Peaks. The founder does not coerce you but assigns you an experience task to track down the eldest senior brother who has betrayed the sect. At 30, you arrive at Blood Deer City where the eldest senior brother was last seen. You meet Feng Meng, the city lord's daughter, and after a stream of fateful encounters, feelings blossom between you. Under her lead, you sneak into the underground city and come across a heritage, learning the killing sword technique. At 31, a mysterious cultivator attempts to sacrifice the entire city's population. You discover that he is the eldest senior brother you have been looking for. After a violent battle, he captures Feng Meng and threatens your life unless you destroy your sword intent. Do you choose to accept? Upon reading this, Guan mused that love was indeed a stumbling block for swordsmen. But as an aspiring swordman, how could he not save Feng Meng? If he listened to this eldest senior brother, he would be willingly surrendering. A dilemma. After a moment of struggle, Guan decided to trust Yang Xian. If the eldest senior brother felt threatened by Yang Xian, it indicated that he was wary of Yang Xian, who must also have an ace up his sleeve. If he died just like that, then it meant the path of chivalry was not viable. He would just read books in the future and give no further thought to it. Guan silently chose to agree. You agree to destroy your sword intent. You dissipate the sword intent within you and sustain serious injuries. Your eldest senior brother laughs wildly, mocking your foolishness and threatening to execute Feng Meng. At the critical moment, your master, the founder of the 1,000 Swords Immortal, acts. Using his finger as a sword from millions of miles away, he instantly kills your eldest senior brother. Enduring the pain, You catch Feng Meng as she falls from the sky. At 32, as you're contemplating the sword Dao in the courtyard, Feng Meng visits you. She confesses her true feelings, wishing to marry you and for you to inherit her father's legacy and walk the path of immortal cultivation again. Do you choose to accept her? No. Never marry. Without hesitation, Guan made the decision on behalf of Yang Xian. If the original self has not married, what right do you have? You reject Feng Meng's heartfelt proposal, leaving her deeply hurt. That night, you secretly leave Blood Deer City and pursue your own sword Dao. The subsequent hints were all about traveling and performing chivalrous deeds. Yang Xian did not return to the Thousand Swords Immortal Peaks, nor did he go back to the Purple Micro-Immortal Mansion. Seeing Yang Xian walk the path he wished to, Guan felt gratified. Yang Xian was more obedient than the previous reincarnation bodies. At 40, based on your years of acting heroically, you earn a good reputation, but you still cannot recondense sword intent, nor can your Dao level grow. You find yourself in a quandary, uncertain whether to engage in a killing tribulation, executing those extremely vicious to seize their lifespan, and thereby restore your sword Dao. Do you choose to undertake the killing tribulation? Kill extremely vicious people, what's there to hesitate about? Guan felt that taking lifespan did not conflict with being heroic. Being a hero didn't mean killing no one. What he had to do was to punish evil and promote good. You choose to undertake the killing tribulation, but another voice within cautions you, placing you in another dilemma. Voices urge you to take up the butcher's knife, warn you of the Demon King's initial intentions, and in the end, you choose not to engage in the killing tribulation, remaining true to your Taoist heart. In the esoteric process, you sense a wisp of sword intent close to you, yet invisible and intangible. It actually resists my choice? For the first time, Guan encountered such a situation. Fortunately, Yang Xian had his own realizations, which made Guan even more hopeful. At 41, while saving someone, you are severely injured by a great cultivator. You flee into the river and drift down into an isolated island, where you find an abandoned bamboo tower to recover. At 43, having observed the mist in the forest for a long time and contemplating the natural world, you begin to create your own swordsmanship. At 45, you founded 1,000 forms of swordsmanship, reconvened your sword intent, and you welcomed the path enlightenment. At 48, your achievement in the sword Dao surpassed what came before. Every blade of grass and tree seemed alive with intent, as did the mountains and rivers, and you embarked on a path of the sword Dao that belonged only to you. At the age of 50, a youth stumbled upon your island, mistaking you for an immortal and wishing to take you as his master. As soon as he arrived, the bamboo swords you crafted quivered, and you sensed a sword intent from him. Realizing he was the innate sword intent the sword immortal ancestor spoke of, a person naturally suited for sword practice. Did you choose to take him as a disciple? Innate sword intent? Is it that formidable? Without much thought, Guan chose to agree. Taking a disciple was not a bad thing. After all, he himself had taken disciples. Every choice brings both fortune and misfortune. As long as he did not resist in his heart, willingness was sufficient. You chose to take the youth as a disciple, hearing that he was raised by bandits and had no real name. Thus you named him Yang Pingan. At 52, Yang Pingan had mastered all your sword techniques, but he could not yet perceive sword intent nor could he refine his own. Moving on, Yang Pingan's name appeared in every prompt. Yang Xian advanced his own understanding of the sword Dao, while observing Yang Pingan's cultivation. Guan was astonished. The natural talent of Yang Pingan in the sword Dao was truly exceptional, even exceeding Yang Xian's by some measure. At 60, your sword Dao reached even greater heights. That year, Yang Pingan desired to leave the island to gain experience. Did you choose to allow him to leave? No. Having only practiced for a few years? With such little skill going out, is he seeking death? You disagreed with Yang Pingan's departure. Dissatisfied, Yang Pingan thus agreed to the rule you set. He could leave to gain experience only after he defeated you. He dedicated himself to intensive cultivation. Reading this prompt, a bad premonition suddenly arose in Gu An's heart. Could it be that master and disciple will turn on each other later? As Guan pondered, he watched the incessant flow of prompts before him. It was still about cultivation, yet now included the challenges from Yang Pingan. Every 5 years, Yang Pingan would challenge Yang Xian, and according to the prompts, both master and disciple were growing rapidly. At 100, you once again ascended a step in your Sword Dao, and your consciousness peered into the Sword Dao river. You saw figures standing upon the river, and yearning for it. You drew closer only to encounter one of the figures swinging a sword at you, damaging your Sword Dao. Your consciousness retreated back to your body, and you found your sword intent temporarily dispersed, with your internal spiritual power also depleted. At this moment, your disciple Yang Pingan came to challenge you. Did you choose to consent to his challenge? Such terrible timing. Guan wanted to refuse, but on second thought, refusing meant showing weakness. Yang Pingan likely harbored no intent to kill him. It would be a good test of Yang Xian's true strength. Without sword intent and spiritual power, could Yang Xian still defeat Yang Pingan? You agreed to Yang Pingan's challenge, and after a fierce battle, both of you were injured, with Yang Pingan winning by a narrow margin. He shouted out excitedly, venting out years of repressed frustration, and you could only let him travel the world. Before parting, Yang Pingan gave you 3 deep kowtows, saying he would never forget the kindness of your teachings. At 101, your wounds healed. You reconvened your sword intent and gained new insights. Seeing Yang Xian actually lose, Guan felt helplessly resigned, but thankfully Yang Pingan still had some conscience. The path of practice continued. Yang Xian gave up the ability to seize lifespan, yet his growth rate remained swift. He secluded himself in the deep mountains without wandering out, delving into the Sword Dao, his cultivation advancing by leaps and bounds. Yang Pingan, however, did not return again. One prompt followed another. Quickly, time brought Yang Xian to the age of 500. At 507, you attained the accomplishment of perceiving everything in heaven and earth as a sword, and you buried all your swords at the bottom of a lake outside your island. At 508, a masked woman arrived at your island, claiming to be Feng Meng's daughter. Feng Meng was near death and wished to see you one last time. Did you choose to agree? Feng Meng? She actually had a daughter, but that was normal. Not all women can wait forever, especially since she was rejected by Yang Xian. With a sense of reminiscence in his heart, Guan then fell into hesitation. Chapter 435. Sword Saint, Great Hongdao Sky. After much hesitation, Guan still chose to agree. After all, it was Yang Xian's life, and considering the affection between Yang Xian and Feng Meng, even in the absence of love and with old acquaintances departing, a farewell was appropriate. You chose to agree to meet Feng Meng. You packed up and left that same day. In the same year, you arrived in Blood Deer City and saw Feng Meng. She lay on her bed, her face devoid of any color, and you noticed an energy within her similar to sword intent, but more complex and eerie. Upon investigation, you learned that Feng Meng had never married. The masked woman was a descendant of the Feng family. With her impending death, Feng Meng sought to test your feelings for her. Understanding the truth, you felt a mix of emotions. At the age of 509, no matter how much you helped, Feng Meng still succumbed to her illness. You stood before her grave in contemplation, standing for months as your hair turned from black to white. Suddenly, you felt a faint energy emanating from Feng Meng's grave, moving towards the distance. Believing this related to her death, you decided to investigate. Before leaving, you engraved wife of Yang Xian on her tombstone. Seeing this, Guan suddenly felt ashamed. Had he originally agreed to marry Feng Meng, would the outcome have been different? The reminder for reincarnation continued. The mysterious energy moved slowly, and along the way, Yang Xian avenged evil and promoted good. His reputation as a virtuous swordsman began to spread. He also gradually realized that the people of the world were suffering under the oppression of the dynasty, while the immortal cultivation sects sat idly on their pedestals, not helping the people in misery, but only extracting benefits from the secular world. Thus, Yang Xian continued his charitable journey, Though his enemies grew more numerous, his mastery of the sword Dao was unmatched and unstoppable. Years later, following the mysterious force, he reached the outskirts of the imperial city, discovering bodies of commoners and cultivators piled up outside the city walls, discarded haphazardly into mountains of corpses, a horrifying sight. Seeing that the energy had entered the imperial palace, Yang Xian faced another moment of decision. As the imperial city was closed for a ritual, forbidding entry, Guan chose to forcefully enter. This was not a moment in Yang Xian's life to shrink back. The reminder continued. Forced entry into the imperial city put Yang Xian in a difficult position, but wielding the heavens and the earth as his sword, he managed to enter the palace unharmed. He had slain a great demon that shocked the world, exposed the evil plans of a reputable sect, and even stopped the demon path from massacring the people of the dynasty. His deeds were widely known and had become legendary. At the age of 9,999, after meditating for 10 years, you finally attained enlightenment, transformed your golden core into a primordial elixir, and achieved the carefree Taoist skill. Wow! A carefree primordial immortal, not even 1,000 years old? What kind of talent is this? Yang Xian didn't possess vast immortal cultivation resources, and didn't even have a great power often giving him guidance. Yet he cultivated so quickly? After becoming a carefree primordial immortal, Yang Xian could do even more. He even came into contact with the greatest evil of the Dahong realm, the Hongdao heaven. This was the strongest force in the Dahong realm, located above heaven and earth, like an immortal overseeing all living beings. They took mortal spirits as food, indiscriminately plundered the Dao level of cultivators, all while remaining excellently concealed. Even if someone knew, those with knowledge dared not speak out. Yang Xian was approached by a cultivator, whose family had been slaughtered by the Dahong Dao heaven for help. Thus he learned of their heinous acts. Although Dahong Dao heaven possessed a power surpassing the 9 heavens of the immortal path, and he could not shake them, he still chose to help the seeker of revenge, and executed the carefree primordial immortal of Dahong Dao heaven. Decades later, the Dahong Dao heaven sent people to recruit him. Knowing his character, Guan helped him decline the invitation from the Dahong Dao heaven. After that, great cultivators occasionally attacked Yang Xian. He repelled them one by one, until he finally faced suppression by a mysterious great power. Due to the vast difference in cultivation levels, Yang Xian was struck into the mountains by a single hand of his opponent. At the critical moment, a sword light cut through heaven and earth and saved Yang Xian. It was none other than his first mentor, the sword ancestor of 10,000 swords. The sword ancestor of 10,000 swords rescued Yang Xian and took him out of the Dahong realm to hide in a secluded minor heaven and earth. The sword ancestor of 10,000 swords warned Yang Xian never to oppose the Dahong Dao heaven again, as he could not protect Yang Xian if he truly angered the Dahong Dao heaven. Faced with the choice, Guan decided to endure in silence for the time being. Once Yang Xian's injuries healed, the sword ancestor of 10,000 swords began to instruct him in cultivation, and after 10 years of personal teaching, the sword ancestor left. Yang Xian resumed his cultivation and leveling up. He no longer sought to rescue individuals from suffering. He wanted to help all the living beings of the Dahong realm. This cultivation lasted tens of thousands of years. At the age of 70,000, Yang Xian reached the free immortal realm of the 9 heavens of the immortal path. Chapter 436. Achieving Sword Dao. Saint Ancestor, a free immortal of 70,000 years, achieved his realm through meditation and cultivation. Impressive indeed. Guan was even more excited about Yang Xian's future, wondering if he could surpass the free immortal realm and overcome the death tribulation that awaited according to past experiences. After reaching the free immortal realm, Yang Xian returned to the Dahong realm. Along his journey, he met several cultivators from the Dahong realm and learned about the situation there. For thousands of years, every millennium, the Dahong Dao heaven would cleanse a region with blood. There were less than 100 regions in the Dahong realm, and now, Its cultivators were wary of the Dahongdao heaven and started to establish their dojos in outer heaven. After parting ways with those cultivators, Yang Xian returned to the Dahong realm alone. He first visited his birthplace, the Ziwei Immortal Mansion, only to find it annihilated by the Dahongdao heaven long ago. The once familiar land was desolate, with just a few broken walls remaining of the Immortal Mansion. Hatred for all living beings combined with personal vengeance. Even Guan was concerned for the Dahongdao heaven, questioning whether Yang Xian would embark on a slaughter. Although the Dahongdao heaven had beings that transcended the 9 heavens of Immortal Path, Yang Xian also had the ability to evolve his lifespan, yet he chose not to use it. The following year, Yang Xian went to the site of the former Blood Deer City. He could no longer find Feng Ming's bones, and the city had vanished over time, leaving no trace behind, as though that memory was a figment of his imagination. Yang Xian decided to draw his sword against the Dahongdao heaven. 2 years later, Yang Xian descended upon the Hongtian realm of the Dahongdao heaven, intending to destroy its chi fortune and dissolve it. For this, he faced an ambush by the Dahongdao heaven. During the fierce battle, Yang Xian continuously improved his sword Dao achievement, making Guan suspect that he had used his lifespan evolution ability. The free immortals of the Dahongdao heaven were alarmed. 10 free immortals besieged Yang Xian, but he held his ground, wielding the world's essence as his sword, casting a brilliance that shook the ancient and modern world, even harnessing the power of the Sword Dao River. The Sword Dao River, like the River of Destiny and the River of Time, was a manifestation of the Dao. Mortal spirits could not fathom it. It represented the condensed power of the Sword Dao. Boosted by the Sword Dao River, Yang Xian eliminated the physical bodies of the 10 free immortals in one strike, forcing their divine souls to flee in disarray. Just as Yang Xian was about to destroy the foundation of the Dahongdao heaven, an ancient being from it descended, a being who surpassed the free immortals, leaving Yang Xian to fend off the attacks as best as he could. When Yang Xian was nearly overwhelmed, the Sword Saint ancestor arrived to aid him and ultimately fell. Yang Xian, in utter fury, awakened his sword heart to a divine level, making heaven and earth tremble. Guan, looking at the prompt before him, could already imagine how dire the situation had been. A battle of free immortals against a Taoist hidden immortal. Without the protection of the Sword Dao River, Yang Xian, no matter how strong, would have met his demise. But this time was different from the past. Yang Xian had an ally. After tens of thousands of years, his disciple Yang Pingon appeared to help. Remarkably, Yang Pingon had also become a free immortal. Together, teacher and student united in their Sword Dao, critically wounded the old ancestor of the Dahongdao heaven, and forced him to flee beyond the heavens. In the end, Yang Xian and Yang Pingon together destroyed the foundation of the Dahongdao heaven. The heavenly Dao sensed their action, and grand heavenly Dao merit fell upon them. Their cultivation levels skyrocketed, and they both condensed Tao fruits. Taoist hidden immortal. A Taoist hidden immortal of less than 100,000 years, and moreover, a teacher and student duo. Guan was deeply moved. If he had not taken Yang Pingon as his disciple back then, Yang Xian would likely have died at the hands of the Dahongdao heaven. The chi fortune of the Dahongdao heaven dissipated. Its followers scattered and fled. The news spread far and wide. The names of the Sword Saint and Sword God resonated across the world, becoming legends of the Dahong realm. Afterward, Yang Xian chose to leave the Dahong realm. Yang Pingon declared his intention to create a new world order, pledging to protect all living beings personally. Yang Xian gave him a deep, meaningful look, then set out to roam the cosmos beyond the heavens alone. Yang Xian arrived at a fragmented world beyond the heavens to engage in path enlightenment. His battle with the Dahongdao heaven had given him much insight. Guan saw multiple prompts of him comprehending the Karma Dao, Chi Fortune Dao, Fate Dao, and Creation Dao. At the age of 100,034, a mysterious figure invaded your dojo, claiming to be the Black Profound Emperor and challenging you to a combat. Do you choose to accept? Black Profound Emperor. Guan's spirits lifted at the sight of these 3 words. However, he was unsure whether Yang Xian's time was in the past or future, thus unable to judge the Black Profound Emperor's cultivation level. For now, better refuse. I'll take care of him myself later. Such were Guan's thoughts. You choose to refuse the Black Profound Emperor's request for a combat. However, he unexpectedly made a move. You countered with a single sword strike, annihilating the Black Profound Emperor's physical body. His divine soul manifested in shock and fear, leaving behind a harsh threat before escaping with an Xian Miao method beyond your pursuit, leaving you sinking into contemplation, watching the direction he fled. Ha! 1. Victory with a single strike. Guan was filled with surprise and delight. Yang Xian was more formidable than Lu Han, Xiao Xingtian and Chu Lu. However, it was regrettable that the Black Profound Emperor had escaped from this life. It was clear that the Black Profound Emperor had been relentlessly pursuing his reincarnation. Why was that so? What grievance did they have that warranted the Black Profound Emperor to persistently hunt down his reincarnation body? Guan couldn't figure out why, but he began to look forward to Yang Xian encountering the Black Profound Emperor again. After surviving the attack of the Black Profound Emperor, surely Yang Xian should be able to reach an even higher realm? After the Black Profound Emperor fled, Yang Xian reflected on the path enlightenment for 1,000 years, and then he ventured deep into the cosmos, entering the silent destruction domain, and made the acquaintance of people whose mere titles were extraordinary. There were still female cultivators at the Tao fruit realm who wished to become his Taoist friend, and Guan still helped him refuse. At 300,000 years old, Yang Xian achieved the status of Xian Yuan free immortal. He continued to uphold the chivalrous spirit of relieving suffering in the cosmos, spreading his name even further, and he gained a new title, Sword Dao Saint Ancestor. At 332-71-34 years old, while you were teaching Sword Dao to the juniors of various dojos in the universe, the Black Profound Emperor suddenly attacked, wishing to annihilate your entire dojo. You used the stars as your sword, with the sword intent of billions of stars converging into a Sword Dao holy net that enveloped the Black Profound Emperor and fiercely vanquished him. However, you did not receive a prompt about seizing lifespan. Hence you concluded the Black Profound Emperor was still alive. This bastard was really hard to kill. Guan began to grind his teeth. The prompt continued. After 350,000 years, Yang Xian wanted to see just how vast the universe was and continued his travels. In the end, he arrived at the boundary gate. Guan inwardly cursed his luck, but had no choice in the matter. At 350,008 years old, upon arriving at the boundary gate, as you were immersed in the profound Tao of the boundary gate, a figure stepped out from within the gate and attacked you, causing your physical body to perish. Your sword intent barely protected your divine soul, but the assailant struck again, annihilating your divine soul. You died at the hands of the heavenly spirit god. Reincarnation cycle has ended. Guan's face darkened. He knew it would be this way. Chapter 437. Holy Heart Sword Dao. The change in Guan after inheriting the memories of Yang Xian. Guan had received Yang Xian's Sword Dao inheritance, which was the essence of his life's cultivation. Holy Heart Sword Dao. This Sword Dao uses the heart as its foundation. Whatever the heart conceives can be transformed into one's own sword. Flowers, grass, trees, and woods can become swords. Mountains, rivers, seas can become swords. All living beings can become swords. The sun, the moon, and the stars can become swords. Yang Xian even wanted to turn the 3,000 Great Dao into his swords, but his Sword Dao had not yet truly reached the level of the Great Dao, so it was only a conceptual idea for now. By the time Guan had fully accepted Yang Xian's memories, he opened his eyes, and a day had gone by. It seemed like only a day, but he had experienced a reincarnation. Those memories were so intense that they felt as if he had lived them firsthand. He was Yang Xian, but he was not entirely Yang Xian. To put it precisely, Yang Xian was just a part of him, Guan, and this feeling was very mystical. Yang Xian brought Guan not only the Holy Heart Sword Dao, but also a profound understanding of the many Great Dao. Even Guan was amazed by Yang Xian's perceptiveness. Without utilizing the evolution of lifespan, Yang Xian's understanding of the Great Dao was deep, stronger than other reincarnation bodies. Guan checked the lifespan consumed by the lifespan barrier, which wasn't too much, stood up, and in one step, returned to the hidden spirit palace. Deep-sea dragon carp was cultivating. Upon hearing footsteps, he opened his eyes, saw Guan return, and was pleasantly surprised, promptly rising to ask, "Master, why have you returned?" Guan looked at him and said, "Didn't you want some combat techniques? How about I pass on a set of swordsmanship to you?" "Of course, thank you, master." Deep-sea dragon carp immediately thanked Guan, and excitedly approached him, full of expectation. Guan didn't say much and began to impart the swordsmanship to him, guiding him to practice the Holy Heart Sword Dao from some simple techniques. Deep-sea dragon carp felt a change in Guan's aura, but he couldn't quite pinpoint what had changed, instead feeling an even greater respect for Guan. This was the influence of Yang Xian's memories on Guan. Yang Xian, often referred to as the Sword Dao Saint ancestor, who regularly lectured, couldn't hide the refined dignity about him, and it had already begun to affect Guan. Integrating reincarnation memories inevitably affected Guan to some extent. An ancient hour later, Guan returned to the Third Medicine Valley and, after stepping off the transmission array platform, was greeted by disciples. "Do you feel any changes in our teacher? You all noticed too? Indeed, there is a change. Has the old man made another breakthrough? Our teacher's understanding of the Tao is beyond our imagination. Remember who's backing him." The disciples watched Guan's retreating figure, whispering among themselves. Some even deliberately flattered him, guessing he could overhear. When Guan arrived in front of the pavilion, Blood Prison Great Saint was also startled by the change in his aura. Had his master's cultivation level improved? He admired Guan, and the stronger Guan became, the happier he was, because he had decided to follow Guan for life. It doesn't necessarily have to be a millennium, be prepared. Guan stopped and said that to Blood Prison Great Saint. Upon hearing this, Blood Prison Great Saint was taken aback, his bovine fur fluttering as if blood flame was burning. Guan continued upstairs, returned to his room, sat at his desk, took out paper and ink, and began writing down the sword techniques and cultivation techniques from Yang Xian's memories. He wasn't afraid of forgetting them. He just wanted to write them down to spread fortune in the future. He could even create a pavilion in the future dedicated to these secret books, not for profit but to display. Cough cough. To show off. Half an ancient hour later, there was a knock on the door. Guan responded, and an Xian pushed the door open and entered. She closed the door behind her, then came to the desk, not saying anything but simply observed Guan. Guan did not stop writing, and without lifting his head he asked, "Is something the matter?" An Xian giggled. "I heard that Master's temperament has undergone some changes, and everyone is speculating that you've had a breakthrough, so I came to see for myself." "Indeed, you've changed, seeming even more like a great power than before." Guan smiled but did not respond. Suddenly, he thought of Yang Xian's experiences and asked, "Do you ever harbor affection?" An Xian paused, puzzled. She asked, "Harbor what affection? There is no one in Medicine Valley who could stir mundane desires in me, and I will never fall into a calamity of emotions in my life. My senior brother once told me that his biggest regret was getting emotionally involved with someone, which hindered his progress, yet it would pain him to abandon it. I will never allow myself to fall into that situation." And Shangtian and the later generations of the Yin family were still harboring grievances against An Hao, making an Xian even less inclined to marry and have children. Moreover, she was cultivating immortality and would not be swayed by the instincts of flesh and blood. She was happy as she was and truly did not crave love. Guan looked up at her and seeing that she was not just giving lip service, he smiled. "Is that so? Affection is not as simple as you think. When fate arrives, you might forget your words today." An Xian tilted her chin defiantly. "I won't forget. Master, you aren't trying to send me away, are you? How could that be?" "I've just been reading a book these past 2 days and felt some emotions about the love story within," Guan explained while once again feeling that complex emotion well up within him. Yang Xian's biggest regret in life was rejecting Feng Meng. He had never had a woman because the memory of Feng Meng's feelings for him was satisfaction enough. Hearing this, an Xian breathed a sigh of relief and reminded him, "Master, you should read fewer miscellaneous and idle books." Guan couldn't help but glare at her. "Get out, get out, get out! You have no respect for your elders." An Xian grinned triumphantly, bowed and then left. Guan continued writing the secret book as the sun outside the window gradually set. Time kept flowing by. 3 years later, all who knew Guan had grown accustomed to the changes in his temperament. Through integrating the Holy Heart Sword Tao, his sword intent had also improved, making swordsmanship once again his strongest technique. On this day, Guan stood on the cliffs at the edge of the third Medicine Valley, gazing up at the sky. He saw in the depths of the universe, near the silent destruction domain, a massive city appeared, pitch black in color, as big as the sun above the great heavenly spirit land. The Annihilation God Emperor was hiding within that black city. Holy Courts, Immortal Dynasties, Xianyu Divine Dynasty, and the Sky Demon Great Sect from the great heavenly spirit land had all sent people to investigate, but anyone who came close to Black City would turn to stone. Looking around, the void was suspended with hundreds of stone statues, the strongest among them reaching the Tao Void mysterious immortal realm, which was a pity. What exactly are you planning to use to attract Longqing? Guan wondered to himself, noting that the Annihilation God Emperor was shrouded in a causal force stronger than even the free immortal, indecipherable, surely the true body of the Annihilation God Emperor. Just then, a figure descended from the sky and landed beside Guan. It was Wu Ju. In recent years, Wu Ju had just broken through to the Mahayana realm, making a name for himself in the Supreme Sect, and had drunk day and night with Guan. Guan looked at him and smiled, asking, "What brings you here?" Wu Ju with excitement said, "I have news about Hao. He has now attained nirvana, and has arranged a time for a decisive battle at sea. The Supreme Sect plans to send a group of cultivators to the array platform to support him, and I will go too." Hao. This was the most talented genius in the history of the Supreme Sect, still a legend to this day, constantly spoken of by many disciples. Guan pretended to be surprised, raising his eyebrows. "He's advanced so quickly? Is his opponent formidable?" "The opponent is a loose immortal. He's challenging a loose immortal beyond his realm, so this has caused quite a stir overseas. Your disciple in Xian has a good relationship with him. Do you want me to pass on a message?" Wu Ju said with a smile, unable to wait to watch the battle. After a moment's thought, Guan said, "Never mind, don't tell her, so she doesn't worry." "That makes sense," Wu Ju nodded and continued. "You know just how powerful is Hao now. He dares to challenge a loose immortal at the Nirvana realm. It's said that it gets increasingly difficult to surpass others in the higher realms of the immortal path. And even within the same realm, defeating one another is as hard as reaching the heavens." Hao was younger than Wu Ju, who had just reached the Mahayana realm. Yet Hao was already challenging loose immortals. How could he not admire Hao? For a long time, he had been the #1 talent of the Supreme Sect, but both he and everyone in the sect felt he was not the strongest talent in the sect's history, because someone else was firmly holding that position. Guan pointed to his own face, feigning astonishment. "You're asking me?" Wu Ju laughed. "Aren't you the self-proclaimed sword venerable Fudao? After all, Hao is your disciple. Do you want me to tell him about this?" Guan gave him a sidelong glance. "You don't believe me anyway. Say what you want. I'm not afraid." Wu Ju got excited. "Since you're not afraid, I'll tell him. I'm looking forward to the scene when you two meet." Chapter 438. The Hong Sword Heaven. Wu Ju argued with Guan for a while before leaving in a hurry. Today, the Supreme Sect had just received news, and because the journey was long, he had to leave immediately. The Hall of Elders of the Supreme Sect was also anticipating Hao's strength, so the arrangements were made urgently. In the following 3 days, the news of Hao challenging a loose immortal spread to the Third Medicine Valley, sparking discussions among the disciples. As Hao's junior sister, an Xian naturally received a lot of attention. Guan went downstairs and looked afar, Seeing an Xian surrounded by dozens of female disciples chirping incessantly, their voices merging into a noisy chorus. He had just descended the stairs when Ji Xiaoyu stepped out of the door. Guan initially thought she was looking for him, but she merely glanced at him before leaping up and swiftly flying out of the third medicine valley. Guan subconsciously deduced Ji Xiaoyu's fate, and knowing what she was about to do next, he felt relieved. He walked towards the dojo. This time he was not interested in playing chess. Upon reaching the dojo, Guan did not step in but instead watched from the periphery as disciples and cultivators played chess. It was unusual not to see the nine-fingered divine lord, and Guan felt somewhat unaccustomed. Longqing approached from the entrance of the valley. Spotting Guan, his eyes lit up, and he hurried over. He came beside Guan and curiously asked, "Master, would you like to play chess? Shall I keep you company?" Guan glanced at him and said, "You a lousy chess player, play with me? Didn't I ask you to cultivate your Taoist heart? Why are you fooling around with the white spirit rat again?" Hearing this, Longqing scratched his head awkwardly and said, "It claimed it had found a treasure and wanted me to accompany it." Guan asked, "And then?" Longqing clenched his fists in frustration and gritted his teeth. "It tricked me into a cave and then filled the entrance with dung. It infuriated me. I must settle the score later, master. It's really despicable." Upon hearing this, Guan silently stepped back. Longqing continued to curse the white spirit rat. In the entire third medicine valley, except for an Xian, everyone detested the white spirit rat. Though it was merely mischievous without truly harming anyone, and occasionally even gifted treasures to the disciples it had bullied, they could only endure its antics. Listening to Longqing's complaints, Guan just listened without comment. Although the white spirit rat was nasty to others, it was very submissive to him, often trying to please him. How could he punish it? After Longqing had finished venting, Guan suddenly asked, "I'm planning to establish a sword mountain. Where do you think it should be located?" "Sword Mountain." Longqing was stunned, his face showing surprise. "Wait. The master is Sword Venerable Fudao. Could this sword mountain, like the heavenly repair platform, contain his sword intent? It must be so." Longqing immediately became excited, turning his head to select an appropriate location. The reason for creating Sword Mountain was to commemorate the ancestor of the 10,000 swords. The 10,000 sword peaks of the ancestor left a vivid memory. Hillsides covered in swords, each of exceptional grade and rank, each containing different sword intents. All the sword intents together were like the heaven and earth rules converging, forming a unique realm of their own, a realm of the sword Tao. And it was the 10,000 sword peaks that had inspired Yang Xian to create the Holy Heart Sword Tao. Longqing eagerly began to suggest ideas, and Guan had him follow to look around. Having the rare opportunity to roam the hills alone with Guan, Longqing felt delighted, and the master and disciple walked toward the edges of the Medicine Valley. Seeing this scene, a smile appeared on Enzin's face surrounded by people. Longqing was someone she had watched grow up, always considering him like her own child. Over the years, Longqing often confided in her privately. He felt that his master could help him, but insisted on tempering his Taoist heart. He suspected that his master did not like him. Naturally, an Xian hoped that there would be no rift between Guan and Longqing. Seeing Guan willing to spend time alone with Longqing, she thought Guan wanted to help Longqing. An hour later, Guan and Longqing reached the top of the mountain. Side by side, they looked out over the forests outside the Medicine Valley, a sight so magnificent it was breathtaking. "Do you still think I'm singling you out?" Guan suddenly asked, his gaze following up to the sky. The reincarnation vortex was fluctuating again. A massive amount of spiritual energy was emanating from it, clearly indicating that a force was arriving on the scene, likely with hostile intentions. Longqing quickly waved his hands, saying, "How could that be? Master, why would you single me out? If not for you bringing me back to the Medicine Valley, I would probably have been devoured by demon beasts." He had indeed once thought that his master disliked him, but after Guan had made it clear last time that he carried significant karma and revealing it would invite catastrophe, he no longer indulged in wild thoughts. Now he was more eager for Guan to teach him cultivation. "Master is Sword Venerable Fudao. Even teaching him just a couple of moves is enough for him. Guan heard Longqing's words and smiled with satisfaction. If you truly think that way, I'm relieved. Rest assured, I do look forward to nurturing you, but not now. Do you know who the Bull Demon King is? The Bull Demon King? He has a background. With these thoughts in mind, Guan took out the latest volume of the Supreme Secret Records and began to consolidate his Taoist heart. The Supreme Secret Records were still being written but were no longer sold in the market. Only Guan had access, as a form of repayment from Shenzhen. At dawn, the waves crashed against the shore. On the cliff, streams of sword qi appeared out of nowhere, circling and coiling to form a vortex that rapidly expanded, followed by a figure stepping out from it, landing on the cliff. Bathed in sunlight, this was a man in black armor and a white cloak, his long hair tied under a white jade crown, and a treasure sword hanging at his waist. His handsome face emanated a commanding arrogance. After landing, he looked around. The sword qi vortex behind him quickly contracted. After looking around, he smiled, then raised his right hand, sword qi emerging in his palm to condense into a silver mirror, the mirror reflecting a gentle woman. Sword Lord, the fate of the great heavenly spirit land is in chaos. It is for this reason that I could help you infiltrate it, but this also implies unpredictable dangers. You must be very careful. The woman in the mirror spoke, her face filled with worry. The man with the mirror hailed from Dahong Sword Heaven, revered as Zhu Luo Sword Monarch. Hearing the woman's words, Zhu Luo Sword Monarch responded dismissively. The great heavenly spirit land is not what it used to be. After that great battle, it's just a fragment of the great heavenly spirit land now. No one can threaten me, rest assured. The woman in the mirror frowned, then asked, Can you tell me now why you want to infiltrate the great heavenly spirit land? Zhu Luo Sword Monarch looked into the distance and said, The Holy Heart Sword Tao has reappeared. Those above wish to find the reincarnation or inheritor of the Sword Tao Saint ancestor to serve him, but I disagree. I will defeat him and prove that Dahong Sword Heaven does not need to pursue the Holy Heart Sword Tao. I will create an even stronger Sword Tao. Upon hearing this, the woman in the mirror's expression drastically changed, just about to speak when Zhu Luo Sword Monarch crushed the silver mirror, dissipating it into sword qi. He then identified a direction, stepped forward, transforming into a streak of sword light soaring toward the end of heaven and sea, leaving behind a trail of sword qi mirages, like a mirage hanging above the vast ocean. At the same time, North Sea Mountain Guan wearing a mask sat on the eaves reading a book, his divine thought locked onto Zhu Luo Sword Monarch. The ninth layer of the free immortal realm was intensely replete with the cause and effect of reincarnation. It was estimated that the reincarnation tribulation was about to end, only half a step away from the Tao Fruit realm. When the other party descended onto the great heavenly spirit land, Guan had detected him immediately, and also heard what he had said. He didn't consider Zhu Luo Sword Monarch a threat. Rather, the implications behind the words of the Sword Monarch gave him pause. Did Dahong Sword Heaven intend to serve the inheritor of the Holy Heart Sword Tao? Guan remembered that although Yang Xian had imparted the Holy Heart Sword Tao to Yang Pingon at the time showed no surprise but instead smiled, saying his own Sword Tao was not inferior to the Holy Heart Sword Tao. At that time, Yang Xian's Holy Heart Sword Tao was merely rudimentary, nowhere near as strong as it was when contending with the Heavenly Spirit God, and countless years had passed since then, with the Holy Heart Sword Tao having reached unimaginable levels through the Sword Tao River. Could it be that Yang Pingon had faced setbacks in his Sword Tao and come to believe his own was inferior to the Holy Heart Sword Tao? Guan speculated about what might have transpired after Yang Xian's death, to make Dahong Sword Heaven so highly esteem the Holy Heart Sword Tao. As for Zhu Luo Sword Monarch seeking to trouble him, he wasn't too concerned. What waves could a mere free immortal stir up? If he dared to act against him, Guan wouldn't hesitate due to past feelings. He would kill if necessary. He wasn't Yang Xian. He didn't confine his actions within so many strictures. In the courtyard, Sage Xian Miao, holding a secret book, looked up at Guan and anxiously said, "Mountain God, this secret book is too profound. I can't understand it at all." Back at Three Pure Ones Mountain, he had been considered a prodigy, able to grasp any Taoist sorcery with just a glance. Yet when faced with the secret book bestowed by the mountain god, he couldn't comprehend it at all. Guan nonchalantly replied, "If it were that easy to fathom, becoming an immortal wouldn't be so difficult." Centuries had passed, and Sage Xian Miao had already achieved the mystic heart realm cultivator status. His talent was not lacking. It was just that Guan hadn't prioritized nurturing him. Upon hearing this, Sage Xian Miao could only manage an awkward smile, and continued to delve into the secret book in his hands. Boom! A deafening boom suddenly came from the sky, startling Sage Xian Miao to look up and see a huge ball of light appearing and rapidly expanding, with strong winds soon descending upon the mountains and forests. Sage Xian Miao quickly stood up, frowning deeply. With the mountain god still there, he was not panicked. Mountain god. A sword intent ascended to the heavens a few months ago, and now this bizarre phenomenon has occurred. What could be the reason? Sage Xian Miao asked, turning to Guan as the tempest tousled his long hair. Guan answered, "Obviously someone is fighting." Hearing this, Sage Xian Miao fell into silence. Though he was secluded from the world, people still passed by this place, allowing him to keep abreast of the major happenings overseas, which was currently in the midst of rare chaos.